Hello, Ms. Larsen?
Yes, this is B. Larsen.
Hi, this is Sue McAllister, and you were recommended to me by a friend. My husband and I are trying to go through a divorce process, and we'd like to see about doing this through mediation.
Okay. Have you had any previous experience with mediation?
No, we haven't.
No. Or seen anything on the web or checked it out yet?
Not really. I think, like maybe Joe read an article about it, but my friends have recommended you and recommended mediation.
Okay. How long have you been married?
We've been married for 25 years.
Okay. Any minor children?
Yes, we have one daughter who's 15 and two older children.
Okay. And your husband's name?
Is Joe.
Joe. Are you and Joe still under the same roof?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And have you had the chance to talk with Joe about using the mediation process?
Yes, we have. We have talked about it in terms of trying to keep our finances in order. Mm-hmm. We don't want to lose everything to a divorce court.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the process.
Okay, is this something that we do over the phone, or should we make an appointment to come in and see you?
Well, eventually we'll do that.
Okay.
But if you have some questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
Okay. I think probably the biggest one, I guess, that's really haunting us right now is the financial concerns.
Right.
And how mediation can help us alleviate some of that.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, my role is going to be to facilitate the negotiation between the two of you and to be sure that you touch base on all of the points that the court would require be included in your separation agreement, which is kind of your plan for the future.
Okay.
And the center charges $250 an hour for mediation. Most folks complete the process, depending on how complex their issues are about their kids or about their finances,
Right.
in about 5 sessions.
Okay.
Some take longer, some do it in fewer. And our sessions are 2 hours long.
Okay.
So you can kind of do the math.
Sure.
And you get billed monthly for whatever has taken place that month in terms of our meeting, or in terms of if we have substantive phone calls or emails of any significance. All of those would appear on your bill. And again, depending on what I learn from the two of you about how complex your situation is, we'll talk about the amount of lawyer consultation that it would be wise for you to have. I'm always happier if you start the process before you hire lawyers, so I can learn a little bit about what your needs are going to be, and I can steer you to lawyers who I know will really focus on helping you settle, who don't wake up in the morning itching for a fight.
Sure.
So is that helpful?
That is very, very helpful. So I guess our next step would be to get our calendars out and set up an appointment with you.
Well, I would first like to talk with Joe before we do any scheduling. Would you ask him to give me a call?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And tell him if he calls and doesn't reach me, he might leave sometimes when it would be good for a call back.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the information, and I'll have Joe call you as soon as he can.
Great.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is B. Larsen.
Yes, hi, Miss Larsen. This is Joe McAllister. My wife Sue spoke with you earlier, and she asked me to give you a call.
Right, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the purpose of the call is at least in part for me to answer any questions you might have about the process.
My curious about cost.
Right. The cost is going to be somewhat dependent on how the two of you address mediation. Some folks are able to work through it fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
3, 4, 5 sessions. Our
Mhm.
sessions are 2 hours long, and the charge is $250 an hour, so you can kind of do the math.
Okay. Well, I guess we've spoken to some lawyers, and it's cheaper than that. So we're headed down this road anyhow. It's inevitable. I don't know what's going to get solved or resolved in this. It's just right now for us. It's more pragmatic. We're looking to just get out of this in the best way possible.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a pretty healthy motivation to get it done.
Okay. So I guess we just need to set up some dates. After work is generally better for me. 6, 7 o'clock, something like that.
Sorry, I don't meet in the evenings.
Oh,
Is it
geez.
possible for you to meet close to the end of the day? Typically, my last scheduled appointment is at 4.
Sure. I guess I
That
have
work? Tell me what type of work you do, Joe.
to. I work for Macy's. I'm in the marketing at Macy's.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, been there a long time?
Yeah, actually started Shillito's about 30 years ago. Was with Federated and now Macy's. So yeah, I've been there quite a while.
Well, I remember those days well. In fact,
Sure.
I used to live in the old Shillito's.
Oh, sure. When they converted it to condos.
Right,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was great. I really loved living
Yeah.
downtown.
I miss that store.
Hmm. Okay, well, you say you have no questions about the process and you're just ready to go and ready to schedule?
Sure. I mean, is there something I should know about the process? I don't. I assume we're just hashing out details about a semi-amenable split here. Is that
Right. Well, you're going
Okay.
to be talking about and working in 3 different areas,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
And those would be
Your assets and your debts,
okay.
your parenting plan. I understand one of your kids is 15,
That's correct, Madison. Yeah.
so a parenting plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the support issues.
For financial.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right. So 4 o'clock. We're going to come in later in the day, and then we'll. I don't know. It's.
Have you got your calendar available?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, let's look at possible dates. How do you look on June 15th?
I can make that work. I'm sure Sue's got all the time in the world. She doesn't work. I mean, she does some work, but yeah, that's fine. June 15th at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll trust you'll let Sue know.
Sure.
But you will be receiving a letter confirming and giving you directions for getting to the office.
All right. Excellent. We'll see you on June 15th at 4.
Okay, Joe. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, B.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to finally meet you. Do you have any difficulty finding the office?
No, it's very easy.
Good. I know some folks, even with a GPS, seem to end up at the zoo for reasons I
Okay.
don't know. Well, I'd like you both to just sit back and relax. I know this is probably not the favorite thing you could imagine doing today. I'm just going to talk at you for a while.
Okay.
Explain the process. What you can expect, what I can expect. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I always want to know a little bit about the professionals I work with. I don't often find out much. But I was in an agency practice when I first started practicing law, which had me in court every day, all day. So that by the time I opened my private practice in 1980, can you believe there were still no women in the major law firms?
Yes.
Yes, you can. by the time I opened my private practice, I figured I'll just see what walks in the door. And that my trial skills were by then good enough and I could handle whatever I needed to. Well, a lot of family law cases walked in the door. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it was in the mid-70s that the divorce rate in this country just took off, almost
Why is it?
geometrically. It's interesting. It's complicated reasons. More and more women were entering the marketplace, gaining a little independence. More and more men were less and less willing to simply abdicate their role as fathers and started to want to continue to have an active role with their kids. So those are probably the main driving forces, but it's complicated. So I found myself practicing in that court, in the domestic relations court, pretty quickly. And I found having good trial skills in that court paid off, in that I could often win a case. You know, a lot of lawyers back then, it's changed a bit now, but back then, a lawyer would take one divorce case a month to pay the rent. And they were not particularly skilled. Now we have specialists. But what I discovered was even if I could win my case, and my client would be very happy for about 48 hours. And then the full impact of what had taken place in the courthouse would hit, and they would realize they could no longer even talk to their co-parent because of the bitterness that arose. And I realized I really didn't want to be part of that. It was so destructive of families. So I thought, well, I will become a stellar negotiator. I'll read everything I could get my hands on about negotiation. And actually the book that came out in 1982 that I found most helpful, and I'm going to give each of you a copy actually,
Okay.
was called Getting to Yes. Is that a book you've ever heard of?
I have heard of it.
Have you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the reason I'm going to give it to you is that it really will explain to you quite well, and it's a good, relatively easy read. I've sent it to all my kids. In fact, I've even sent my kids the audio tapes.
Is it available on audio? Because I'm not much of a reader.
Oh, it is available on audio. Yeah. It sets out the steps that you're actually going to go through here in the mediation process. Okay? The first step, and we're going to do that today, is I am going to draw from you in this setting in which hopefully you will be able to hear each other. For most folks, this is such an emotional time that if one of you starts talking before the words are barely out of Sue's mouth, you're saying, no, won't work, can't do that. Because it is stressful. You're sort of on the edge of a cliff right now, looking down.
Yeah.
You're not sure what the future holds. So it's an anxiety-provoking time. So I'm going to find out from you what is most important to you as you design this separation agreement, which is really your plan for the future. Then you are going to collect whatever data you need to collect, that you need to see, and then define the issues. I am going to write down for you on this pad all of the issues that you see that we need to address in the areas which I mentioned to you earlier of assets, debts, support, and your parenting plan. All of the issues. I like to get it all down on one page so you can look at it and you can say, okay, here's the task. This is what we have to accomplish. Okay? Once we define the issues, we're going to start talking about what options we can develop to resolve those issues. And hopefully be able to put them all out on the table without judging them as we go along. Just, you maybe have done this in the past, a kind of brainstorming exercise at work. No. And then you're going to pick and choose amongst those options. Well,
Okay.
you are going to have plenty of subjective criteria to evaluate those options, because you know the muscles in your gut will tighten and you'll say, this is not for me. But you're also going to need some objective criteria, some way of evaluating those options. Where are you going to get some objective criteria? Well, the laws of the state of Ohio, there's one set. Our legislators, in their wisdom, said, here's the public policy of the state when it comes to folks whose marriage is ending. Do you have to follow those laws? You do not. You do not. The law, for example, the law says all marital property. It defines it and then says all marital property will be divided equally.
Right.
Do you have to? No. Whatever works for the two of you is what you can agree to. Okay? Lawyers, the right lawyers, those who are focused on settlement, can also help you learn about some objective criteria. If you consult with a lawyer and you say, here's my situation, I've been married for 25 years, I have 3 kids, 2 are adult, give me the lay of the land. They can do that for you.
And we'll still need that after, I mean, this is not binding, this is just, is that correct?
What you decide in mediation is not legally binding. It's not legally binding until it has been drawn into an actual legal document that you both sign. Right. I can sometimes give you some objective criteria, because I can say, I've worked with some other folks who had a similar concern, here's what they did.
Okay.
Work for you maybe? Maybe not. We'll see. Okay. Well, then the last stage is to put all of those pieces together in an agreement that will offer you some finality, so that you won't be back renegotiating the meaning of a particular clause. Okay. I think I told you on the phone, most folks complete the process in about 5 sessions, unless they're having a lot of difficulty about kids or have a very complex financial situation, which you didn't indicate was the case. And I hope you've had an opportunity to read the contract that I earlier sent you, so you know this is a confidential process. What that really means is nothing that any one of us says, or nothing that I write down on my pad, can ever be taken into a court and introduced as evidence. It does not mean that you can't call your best friend, call a parent, and you will protect each other's privacy, I'm sure. But the constriction is not quite so tight. Most of the time, the 3 of us will be meeting together.
Okay.
But from time to time, I will meet with you each separately. And I will today, because I always do on the first day we meet.
Okay.
And in the jargon of mediation, when I'm meeting with you one-on-one, that's called a caucus.
Okay.
And I offer you confidentiality in caucus as well. So Sue, if you were to say to me, I might be willing to do ABC, but I really don't want that out on the table yet.
Okay.
I mark that in my notes as a confidential communication. I share it with no one until you authorize me to.
Not even?
No one.
Okay.
Okay? And I will, from time to time, decide that it would be a good idea to have a caucus with one and with each of you separately. But you should also feel free at any time to say you would like to have a caucus. Just say so, and we will meet separately.
Okay.
Okay? I'm not looking at the 2 of you as a couple, but 2 separate individuals who've agreed to share this process, and I am making some assumptions about you. I'm assuming that you probably have different perceptions of what took place in the past.
Yeah.
We all do. We see things differently, we hear things differently, we certainly remember things differently. And the only reason I even bring that up today is to say, in this process, it really doesn't matter. We're not going to spend time trying to figure out some empirical truth about the past. This is a forward-focused process.
It's not therapy.
It's not therapy. We're
hear
going
that?
to identify the issues
Okay.
and figure out how to deal with them in the future.
Okay.
Okay?
Just want to be clear.
And I'm also assuming that you have many shared values and that you probably have values you do not share. That's true of all of us as well. We're not going to try to do anything about that. We're not here to try to change anyone's worldview, okay? All right. Before we get started, I do want to dispel a few myths that have grown up about the mediation process, okay?
Okay.
And the first is that to be successful here, you have to be reasonable, calm, cool, collected at all times. Well, I got through saying earlier, and I know your own experience will tell you this, this is probably the most wrenching emotional thing you've ever gone through. I don't think there's anything harder. The possible exception is the serious illness of a child. That probably ranks higher than anything. But this is a close second. These are tough, tough times for you too. So, for me to expect, or for you to expect, that you're going to be able to do this completely cool and calm is not the real world. So I talked to you about this by way of giving you permission. If something happens, if Sue says something that drives you up the wall, Joe, you're free to say so. Don't worry, I will remain in control.
Okay.
It won't get out of hand. Okay. The second myth I want to tell you about, and sometimes folks look at me with a bit of a jaundiced eye when I talk about this, but I think it's completely appropriate in this process for each of you to be very self-centered, egocentric, if you will. If you look at the issues that we develop and you say to yourself, what would be in my own best self-interest? That's a completely legitimate way to address the issue. I am not worried about your children getting lost in the shuffle. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care deeply about how they are going to be feeling when you go through this process and after. Okay? Sometimes folks come in and say, I'll do whatever it takes to protect my children. And we reach decisions very quickly. And 2 months later, they all fall apart. Because you have not really taken good care of yourself. And not only in terms of the issues, but in terms of the process itself. You need to take very good care of yourself. One of the roles that a mediator sometimes plays is kind of as a reality therapist, if you will. So, Joe, if you were to say to me, well, on this point, it's got to be A, B, C, I'd probably say, well, where's that coming from? Well, I've talked to a number of my friends. They've been through it. Everybody has told me, be sure you get A, B, C. I might then say, well, is that something you've ever discussed with a lawyer? And no. Well, would you be willing to have a consultation and talk over that point? You'd probably be obedient and say yes. And then I might say, well, when you do that, would you ask what the likelihood is that that would be the outcome at the courthouse? And how long it might take and how much it might cost? Well, driving back to your office, you might start thinking, this neutral, impartial mediator caused me to feel pretty defensive, pretty uncomfortable with all those questions. Maybe she's got a bias. Maybe she's biased against men. Maybe she's biased against women. If you ever harbor thoughts like that, you have got to bring them up, and we need to talk them through. You know, I said earlier, Sue, this is a forward-focused process. We're
Right.
not dwelling on the past.
Right.
But people do inevitably bring up the past. I mean, the past is your best teacher in some respect.
And that's
Yeah.
what brought us
Yeah.
here, so.
Yeah. So I would probably let you go on for a few minutes, and then I might say, Sue, let's move on.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
2 hours later, you might be thinking, I was about to say something really important, and she shut me down.
Yeah.
If that happens, call me up. Send me an email. Make a note to yourself that when you come back next time, you're going to bring it up. It is vitally important
Okay.
that you both feel fully heard here.
Okay.
Okay? All right. The last myth I will talk to you about is that somehow this is such a great process that you're going to be able to walk out the door of our last session and say out loud or to yourself, this is great. We reached fair outcomes. It is not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because what you think would be a fair outcome is not likely to be what you think is a fair outcome. I don't know at what age we develop our standards of fairness, but I know folks who come into this room rarely are in sync. Oh, sometimes they are about their kids, but overall not. What I do promise you, if you're willing to work long enough and hard enough, is that you will be able to walk out the door at the end of our last session and say, taking everything we discussed into consideration, I find the terms of this agreement acceptable to me. We're going to list on my pad all of the issues that need to be resolved. And if we're talking about issue number 1, and Sue turns to you and says, Joe, will you agree to this? The right answer, if it's the first time it's ever been discussed here, is always, I'll think about it. You should never feel pressed to make a decision until you've talked with whomever you want to, you've seen whatever documents you want to. Okay. 2 weeks later, we're back, and Joe turns to you, Sue, and says, on issue number 4, will you agree to this? And let's say you've done all the homework you need to do, and you're ready, and you say, okay, I'll agree to what you're suggesting here, but now I want to reconsider what I agreed to on issue number 1, and that's fine. Because you're going to look at each of these issues and make decisions as we go along, and they are all tentative. They are all written in sand until you're done with every single issue. And then you're going to look at the totality, and you're going to do a balancing act. Okay, I compromised big time here. I didn't here. And you're going to be able to say, taking everything we discussed into consideration, I find the terms of this agreement acceptable. Got it? Okay. Well, I'm about ready to meet with you. You asked Joe earlier, or you sought some reassurance that this is not therapy. This is not therapy. Those are not my skills. That's not what we're going to be doing. Are either of you currently in counseling?
Yeah.
We work together. She is on her own now, so I just wanted to be clear about what the...
Right, right. Well, I think it's a good idea to have someone, a skilled professional, to whom you can go and use as a sounding board. And I don't insist upon it, but I think it's a sound idea if you can. Keep that up. And you may want to reconsider, and if you do want names of good counselors, good therapists, I'd be happy to supply them to you.
I'm good.
Okay. When I'm meeting with you one-on-one, I'm going to ask you both the same 2 questions. And they are, how did you come to make this decision? How did you reach this decision point in your lives? And somewhat facetiously, I'm saying to you, 25 words or less will suffice. I don't need the whole story. I just want a snapshot of the dynamic between you. And the second question is how did you negotiate during your marriage? What was your negotiating style? It's helpful for me to know that. Okay, now I'm ready to meet with one of you at a time, and I don't care who goes first.
Okay, all right.
Why don't you go first?
So, how are you doing, Sue?
I'm maintaining. Yeah, this is really hard. This is not something that I ever thought that we would be going through.
It is hard. It is hard. Tell me, what got you to this point of making the decision to end your marriage?
It just became. I don't know that there was any one thing that happened. I just became so unhappy and was not myself. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with I raised my kids, and now my baby is 15, and what do I do now? And I've looked at myself. I went out and got a job.
What are you doing?
I work in a veterinarian's office as
Mm-hmm.
an assistant receptionist kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And got back to Sue, who I used to be. I wasn't just somebody's mother or somebody's wife.
Mm-hmm.
I was my own person again, and a totally different person than I was 25 years ago. And I began to look at the things that Joe was doing, and it just made me sad. And I don't think that I love him the way I used to love him. So,
So are you the one who kind of made the final decision to go forward?
I'm not really sure. We talked about the things that were going on with me, and he said that I should probably get some therapy. We did a couples therapy, but then it sort of just turned into my therapy. And instead of making me, I guess, making me not so unhappy, it opened my eyes a lot more. And it opened my eyes to what was going on around me and my relationship with Joe. And it just became futile. It was non-existent. And he and I talked a little bit about that, but I just think we kind of came to this understanding that
So it became a mutual decision?
yes,
Okay.
it did. Sorry, that was a long answer
No,
to a very
that's
short
fine.
question.
Well, how did you and Joe negotiate during your marriage? If disputes arose, how did you deal with them?
If it was about the children, I think it was usually me. I usually had to play the bad guy for the children, for the disciplining. And when it was financial, it was Joe. I mean, he has so much more expertise than I do in things financial. So I always just deferred to his opinion because I figured he knew what was the correct thing to do.
So does that give you some concern about making decisions here about finances, that you are going to defer?
Yes, yes, because I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
And it's a little scary because I don't know what he knows about finances. So I kind of have to rely on his knowledge. I mean, I'm going to get as much as I can, but I have to rely on a lot of what he knows. And if he says that something is, going to be in the best interest of the children or whatever, then I'm not necessarily going to defer to it, but I will respect his opinion. I will always respect his opinion.
Well, that's great, because respect is really what's going to facilitate your getting through this well. But deferring without having good knowledge is not so great.
No, I see that
And-
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really going to be important here that any decisions you make are going to be well-informed decisions.
Right. Okay.
And I hope to be able to pick up on it if I see you just sort of going along to get along
Okay.
and not really understanding.
Yes, because I do that a lot.
But if I don't pick up on it, then you've got to let me know. You can ask for a caucus.
Okay.
Whatever. You've got to let me know. And we need to see to it that you have other ways of developing a good understanding of what's going on.
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
We could suspend things. You can work with a financial planner. I don't yet know how complicated your finances are going to be.
Yeah.
And you can consult with counsel, because that's a really important piece here. You've already told me you're kind of coming more into your own,
Yes.
and you need to do that in the decision-making process here as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as we go forward, what's your greatest concern? What's your greatest worry?
I think my greatest worry is the kids. Joe Jr. Is very, very upset with this.
Yeah.
Chloe, not so much. She's in college. She's just out of college. She's getting ready to graduate. And Madison, being 15, I don't want them to think that this is something that we lived with for a long time and then didn't do because they were in the house. I think that's why we're doing it now while Madison is still in high school.
Okay.
Because I don't want her to think, oh, they stayed together because of me, and then maybe look back and say, oh, did this happen because, yeah.
Right.
That kind of
Kids
thing,
often
yeah.
do that. Kids
Yes.
even blame themselves.
Yes, yes.
And so all of the kids are aware of what you and Joe are now going through?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. Other than the kids, and I appreciate that you do have a lot of concern about them, and we are finding more and more that adult children are influenced by divorce as much as young kids, in fact, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, what about yourself? What's your greatest concern there?
I think I've never supported myself before, and so that is a huge concern of
Okay.
mine, that I am not really employable at my age. I can get a job,
Right.
but I don't know that it's going to sustain me. And Madison and Chloe wants to go to graduate school. I don't know where this money is
Right.
going to come from.
Right. Have you given any thought to any re-education?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No.
Should I?
Well, you might talk about that with the person you're in therapy with.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know whether you'd be motivated to. Some people are
Right.
in midlife motivated to go back and retrain.
Okay.
Others are not, but it'd be a good thing to think about.
Yeah. I've not
Okay.
thought about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anything else I should know before I meet with Joe?
You mean like bad habits or
No, I don't
things
know
that
if
he
there's
does?
anything you think I should know.
I think, and this has just recently come to light for me, is that he has a tendency to put his needs and wants ahead of everything else. And I had never really realized that before.
Okay.
And it's somehow he just went through our marriage in such a way that he was able to justify everything that he did. And oh, okay, and it wasn't just to not pick a fight. It was, I believed him. I was, everything that he did. And even his lack of affection in the past years was just totally justified by him. And then now through therapy, I'm coming to realize that this is something that he knows that he is doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. All right, I'm going to meet with Joe for a few minutes and then we'll get back together.
Okay.
Okay, would you let him know that we're done?
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So, Joe, how are you doing?
Okay.
Are you? Yeah, it's tough stuff.
Yeah, especially for our daughter, our youngest daughter.
For Madison?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me from your perspective, what happened to bring the two of you to this decision?
Boy, I don't know. I feel sort of blindsided by, to some extent. I've worked very hard for the last 30 years and to provide a nice life for my family. I felt a couple years ago, Sue started expressing a sort of general ennui, or she wanted something more, something that she couldn't put her finger on, and she tried some different things. Yoga and this, and then she got a job, if you can call it that. She does about 10 hours a week with a vet. And about a year ago or so, this 10-hour job turned into 25 hours she wasn't being paid, but she was spending more and more time there. And around this time, I inadvertently picked up her phone one day, and there was a text message from this Dr. Steve, the vet, with some very sort of an erotic message. And when I confronted her about this, she said that this is something that has been lacking in our relationship, which I wasn't aware of, and that there was nothing sexual going on with this guy, but that how did she put it? This was fulfilling this emotional need. And then, I don't know, it just suddenly dawned on me. It suddenly dawned on me we didn't really have much of a relationship anyway. I mean, we had, the two older kids are out of the house. I mean, Madison's 15, she's rarely at home. I put in a lot of hours at work, and you come home and generally make my own meal and go to bed, and we, and it just was suddenly really apparent that there wasn't a whole lot there.
I get it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
Well, when the two of you had disputes,
Mm-hmm.
how did they go? How did you interact?
I guess it depends on what, I mean, early on we didn't have a lot of money. But ironically, that was probably the happiest we were. Well, I guess when it came to the kids, that generally fell to her just by virtue of the fact that she was around. Although as they've gotten older, she pretty much gives them whatever they want. Our daughter Chloe right now wants to go to grad school, and for some reason Sue thinks that should be on us, that we should pay for that, and I heartily disagree. And she spoils the heck out of Madison, no question about that. But I guess when it comes to financing, she's always deferred to me. It's just, you kind of fall into these roles in a marriage, and that's been mine. Although, again, lately, some of the decisions I've made financially, with investments and things like that, have not worked out as well, and I've certainly heard about it ad infinitum. And I guess that's been a point of contention as well, which wasn't the case earlier.
Well, as you look forward, what's your greatest concern as this process gets underway? Any fears, any worries?
Well, I with Madison, I do, I don't know what that's going to look like, what this divided parenting is going to be for her, and how she's going to handle that.
So that's your greatest concern about Madison. What about yourself personally?
It's funny when you just ask that question. I mean, there's a part of me, and this is probably horrible to say. I look forward to moving forward. It's been very ugly lately, and we're both in the same house. It's when we do talk, which isn't that frequent, it's very tense. I mean, it can't be a pleasant place for our daughter. Mm-hmm. It's not a pleasant place for me. Mm-hmm. So, and like I said, I feel bad saying this, but there's a part of me that looks forward to this being behind me. I think it might be a relief to some extent.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Is there anything else I should know before we get back together?
We're not going to go on to this whole thing with the text messages and things like that, right? This is not what we're dealing with here.
Typically not, but how do you feel about that?
I'm furious. I feel betrayed.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine so.
I just didn't, this doesn't seem like that's what this is about, so I just wanted to...
Okay, well, that sounds like a mature stance to take if you can hold on to it.
Wow. Try.
Okay. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate your sharing with me, and I have a good snapshot of kind of what's been going on, and that's helpful. I trust you both have had a chance to read the contract.
Yes.
Okay. Then I need your signatures, and you'll notice on the first page there's a place for you to fill in how you're sharing the cost of mediation.
Okay.
Sharing? There's no sharing.
But I thought everything that was, it's our money, right?
You're still putting all of your income, Joe, into a joint account?
Yes, I'm still paying the cost of mortgage, groceries,
right.
Gas.
Right.
Yes.
Well, if you'd like to, you can write in this side of next to the percentages. You can just make it 50-50 and write
well,
from
there is no
marital
50-50.
assets.
This is the
listen
point.
to
There's
what
no
she's saying.
Can I finish?
No, let her
no-
finish.
Wait, Sue, let him talk.
This is what I'm dealing with here. There is no 50-50. I earn an income.
Right.
Sue gets walking around money from Dr. Steve, the vet. So $250 an hour, but today's been $500
That's
out of my
right.
account. Okay, so there's no 50-50, there's no 75-25, there's no 90-10. I mean, this will come out of my paycheck, out of my Macy's paycheck.
Right.
And that's fine. And that's fine. I just want to be clear so that Sue's clear. So that's why I'm saying it to
sure
you.
she is.
Okay.
But the monies that go into that
Super.
joint account are, for now,
Right.
joint marital
Right.
assets.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
And then
nobody
I need your
paid me
signature
for
on the last
raising
page.
children 24/7.
Sue?
Sorry. All right. Okay.
What do these cost you?
I I don't remember. I've had them such a long time.
Ridiculous. It's a colored block.
They're
Somebody
really-
made money on
I-
it.
Really? Well, they came from
Very
the
interesting.
from MoMA, from the Museum.
Oh,
Oh,
Sure.
okay. Well then, yeah. Of
course.
So they
were
must
very
have been,
expensive.
They must have been
Came
pricey.
from an art museum.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Here's what we're going to do next.
Okay.
I would like you both to think very broadly, globally, if you will, broad brush here, and tell me what are the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve in designing the terms for your agreement. What's going to allow you, each of you, to walk out the door of our last session and say, okay, this worked because whatever it is, about yourselves, about your family, about whatever. Again, broad brush.
Joint custody.
Okay, so Joe, why do you want joint custody?
Because I do not want to lose my daughter.
Okay, so you want to maintain a relationship with
Yes.
Madison?
Yes, until she's an legal adult.
Okay.
And it's up to her.
So maybe you need to like start a relationship
So
with
we're
the
just
children.
going to identify
Okay.
for now. We're not discussing these. We're just
Okay,
What-
broad
what-
broad
what-
broad
what-
brush, broad
what is
brush
that about?
is
Why don't you ask her what kind of relationship we have?
Joe?
We have an excellent relationship.
broad brush for me would be being able to sustain the household the way it's been
Maintaining
to
your-
maintain the household
maintain your current standard of living. Is
Correct,
that your goal?
correct.
Okay.
for Madison.
So it will continue not
Joe?
to get cleaned.
Joe,
Is
it's
that
helpful
what
if
your
you
goal
just
is?
talk one at
Okay,
a time because
all right.
I'm trying to get this down. So maintain the current standard of living for Madison. Okay.
And myself.
Okay.
I would also like to add, I'd like some financial equity because, we don't have a lot of assets. And I have set aside some money for retirement. Sue's father is...
Financial equity is good enough. Is there anything else? We'll get into it in more detail, guys. I know I'm shutting you down to some extent
Yeah, you
now.
are.
But we will get into as much as we need to.
Okay.
But for now, I'd just like you to broad brush identify.
Okay, broad brush.
So
Financial.
you'd like to be sure you have financial equity.
That's correct.
Okay.
I would like to be able to maintain. I mean, I'm taking, his part too about joint custody. I understand that. When he's around, he's a great dad. And
What
I-
is
all
it
the
that you'd
kids-
like to achieve?
I would like to achieve some kind of relationship with this man who
Right. Okay. So an
raised all these
ongoing,
kids with me.
an ongoing good relationship with Joe.
Yes.
Okay.
You want to go on double dates with me?
Anything
in the back?
else,
Is that
Joe?
what- No, that's fine.
I'd like to find my own sense of being, my own sense of purpose as an individual again.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
Well, we can talk more about it as we go along.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Anything else come to mind for you, Joe?
Well, those are the two biggies, I guess.
That's okay. If that's it,
If
it's
I
it.
can think of it, I'm sure when
We can
next
always
time
add
out,
to
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, what I'd like to do now is ask you a different question. And now I'm going to ask you to be as specific as you're able to be. We're early on, I don't expect a lot here. But the question is, how would you know? Joe, how would you know that you had achieved this goal of financial equity? What does that mean for you?
I guess, well, I started to go down this road, and I don't know if I'm allowed to, but the money that I have put aside for retirement is I feel like it's mine. My wife stands to inherit a great deal of money from her father.
What? No.
Wait, Sue, your turn will come. Hold on.
So I mean, if a court looks at this and we're going to split this 50-50, I'm going to get the short end of the stick here, because if you divide our retirement and then she inherits, anywhere from $2 to $3 million in a couple of years.
Okay, so you're concerned about retirement, and if you had your druthers,
Well, I'm
you'd
just saying, if
maintain
a court or a judge looks at this and we just split this, the house,
I hear you.
the assets down the middle, it's going to, that might appear to be fair, except that she stands to inherit a great deal of money in a couple of years from her father.
Okay.
And that's not equity to me. That's not going to be into consideration, right? I mean, a court wouldn't look at that as possible future earnings, or I don't know.
Yeah, well,
Don't know
we'll
how
get
that
into the
works.
details of that, and there are some pieces of it
Good,
that may serve you, and there are pieces that may not.
good. I mean, we don't have a
So
whole lot of
what else?
savings. My wife
Right,
has
I understand
spent
that.
a lot of money on.
Well, when you raise 3 kids, you very
It wasn't on
often
the
don't.
kids, believe me.
Yeah.
I wish. Sure, the
Sue,
kids do
for
too.
you, how would you know? What would you see? What would you hear? What would you experience if you were to successfully maintain a standard of living for yourself and for Madison? What does that mean for you?
It means that we would remain in the house, at least until she goes to college.
Okay.
It means that I would be able to be with her when she needs me as a parent,
Be available as a parent.
and not have to work full time.
Okay.
She's 2.5 years away from legal adulthood. I don't
How
know
would you know,
much time
Joe?
she-
How would you know that you had been able to maintain the kind of relationship you hope to maintain with Madison? What would that look like?
Well, Madison's a typical teenager. She's not around a whole lot. She's very active in sports, and I've always made a point of attending all of her games.
So
I mean,
you
I
would continue to do that?
Absolutely continue to do that. Wherever I end up living, I would hope that, I intend to have, a room that's hers, that she knows she has a place in my home, that she's always welcome, that, and I'll be there to make sure that she has meals, which has not always been the case. And, I'm planning on getting her a car next year, and so she has some independence and can get to and from her mom's house and my residence, wherever that may be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Well, talk to me just a little bit, Sue, about the sense of self. And Joe, let her talk, okay? What does that mean for you?
It means that
I gotta take this, I'm sorry. Yep. I'm in the middle of something. Can you call Phil then and just take care of it? I can't right now. I can't. Call Phil. Sorry. I'm sorry. Apologize.
It
Work.
happens.
Work.
Yeah.
it means that I would be an important person in the world. And that doesn't mean, famous or anything like that, but a person that is able to give back into the world, to be an upstanding role model for all 3 kids to have a sense of self-importance, but not at the expense of others. That's what that means to me.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I do not get these pages out and show them to you as some sort of directive. I do get them out actually and look at them when I'm preparing to meet with you, because it gives me a reminder, a sense of what it is you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
But the next step now is for us to define the issues. Remember, we're talking about 3 different areas, which we've already talked about.
Right.
And you can jump around. We're just wanting to be able to list all of the issues that at this moment you think we're going to need to be addressing. We can always add to this list, by the way, as we go along. And I don't care who speaks first, but again, we're not going into a discussion of the issues at this point, we're just listing them. So what do you see as some of the issues
That we need to get past or to get through,
that you need to make decisions
that we need
about?
to make decisions about? Financial status or
You mean support?
support. Thank you.
Okay. Well, when we're talking about support in this context, we're talking about child support and we're talking about spousal support. And there are a lot of sub-issues that need to be addressed. Madison's 15.
Wait a second. Are you talking about alimony? Is that what are you
Yes,
seriously
spousal
considering this?
support is alimony.
You're seriously considering alimony? I'm going to support. Listen.
Joe?
I have absolutely no problem. I will financially support my daughter and all my kids.
I understand. Right now, we're listing the issues, and yes, spousal support is an issue. And it's an issue in many little pieces. Child support seems pretty straightforward. Spousal support is more complicated.
Yeah.
And the issue is, like it or not, Joe, how long, how much, and whether or not it's going to be modifiable. And I'm not going to go into that in any detail right this minute, but I will.
When will we go into that? I mean, that.
When we start discussing the specific issues, we will. Does this come as a shock, huh, Joe?
Yeah, I just went over this.
Well, we'll get to it. All right, so there's one issue is child support and spousal support. What else? Have you decided at this stage whether you're going to be keeping the house or selling the house?
We're selling the house. Yes, we're selling the house.
Oh, we haven't
Especially
decided.
if we're talking about spousal support. I mean, I don't know where this.
So
this,
you're talking
this
about
fictional
either
money's gonna come
keeping or
from.
selling the house.
Right, we haven't decided.
All right.
There's the
Why
house.
would you keep a 5-bedroom house
There's
in Blue Ash?
the boat.
Joe, we're just listing the issues.
There's the house. There's the boat.
What about that? Whether or not it gets sold or kept?
Yes.
Keeping
why
or
would I sell my
selling
boat?
the boat. Okay, what else?
I might have to live on my boat. That might be my residence. Especially if we're talking about spousal support. Jeez, this is.
College expenses.
You probably both know
College
that
expenses for Chloe?
once your children are over 18 and have graduated
right.
from high school,
That's right.
the court has no jurisdiction
You hear this?
over college.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't enter into an agreement if you decide to. Lots of folks in mediation do decide they want to have an understanding about college. And we'll talk more about that. And that's kind of a complicated decision with a lot of different pieces. Okay, what else?
So most of these are just financial issues.
Well, you've started with the financial. I'm sure we'll get to some that are...
Right.
You both have cars, I presume.
Yes.
Would one of you take responsibility for checking out the value of the cars online, Kelley Blue Book, or?
To what end? We're not selling them, are we?
No, but they are assets. They are marital assets. And the equity in those cars, whatever their present value is,
Sure.
minus whatever's owed.
I can do that. I'll
You
do
that?
I'll do that.
Okay. So car values, Joe. You just have the 2 cars?
Yes.
Okay. Any other asset issues that you think of? Are you up to date on your tax returns?
Yes.
So,
And there's the retirement fund.
right? Joe, do you have more than one retirement fund, or you've been with,
No, it's just through, I have a
it's all through Macy's?
401, yep.
And it's a 401k?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you currently making contributions to that
Yeah,
fund?
it's deducted monthly.
Okay. So one issue we're going to have to ultimately decide on is a date for valuation of assets. Date of valuation,
Okay.
okay? And then that's kind of a complicated issue, except that the only issue that's probably changing value very much month to month is your pension.
Mm-hmm.
And an issue that neither of you have raised, but I assume is on your minds, is when do you separate? Have you had discussions about when you're planning to separate? Has that not happened yet?
Sooner the better.
Okay.
No, we haven't discussed it.
Okay. Well, then that's something we need to talk about, and how you're going to finance 2 homes.
Mm-hmm.
You're not planning on purchasing something right out of the box, are you? I mean,
What are you talking about?
Hey guys, we're just going to list the issues, and then we're going to talk about them, and you can ask those
Well, you're
questions.
talking about
as
separate
we get
homes.
to
I
You have
mean,
to
it
get
was
an
good.
apartment
Yeah,
someplace.
that's correct. Yes, I will. Yes, an apartment, a rental unit.
And I'm going to stay in the house.
Well, that remains
Until
to be
this,
seen.
yeah, that's an issue that we have to talk about.
Right.
This is just issues that we have to talk about. We're not deciding things right now.
Are there any other cash assets? CDs, savings accounts, bank accounts?
There's a small little stock investment.
Where is that stock account?
I did some e-trading when we were more flush, and lost some money in 2008 along with everybody else in this country.
Where are those stocks held?
It's just day trading.
It's
not.
the
It's not.
E-Trade.
It's not
Okay.
worth. It's a couple $1,000s. It's literally,
Oh, okay.
At one time it had some value, but does not have much now.
Okay, so no other savings? No other...
Well, the house. We have equity in the house.
Good.
That's why I said this whole discussion about the house. That is our equity. I know that's. You're talking about splitting up.
Well, it's good to hear you've got equity. So many folks at this point
Yeah,
are
you
coming
bet.
in and saying their homes
bet.
are underwater, so that's a positive.
We do have a savings account. We have the joint checking account,
Right.
but that
I mean, that's
Not
just
a
couple
lot in the
$1,000.
savings. And I assume, like most folks, your checking account kind of goes down to
Right.
0 at the end of the month. Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
that's really not going to be deemed as an asset. Any other assets you can think of other than the boat that might be a little tricky to value? Any other assets? Do you have any?
I mean, as I said,
grandfather
as an
clock?
only child, she stands to inherit. Yes, she stands to inherit a great
All
deal
right,
of
so
money.
that's an issue that we're
An
going to put on the
inheritance.
list,
Yep.
Joe, inheritance, and how it gets factored
Yep.
into anything. Okay.
And that's not a given.
Oh, no,
that
of course not.
inheritance.
You never know.
Okay.
Okay.
What's he going to do with it?
Well, we don't know. We don't know whether...
I mean, he said we've been at Thanksgiving, and he said as much that it's his only child. He's going to give it to her. So.
How old is your father?
He is 86.
And how's his health?
It's fine.
Okay.
It's great.
All right.
He
Well,
could
it
do
is an
another
issue. It
15
is an issue,
years.
and we will explore it, and we'll deal with it. I can assure you.
Okay.
Okay. And that's yours, Sue. So that does it for the assets. You don't own any assets that are going to need to be appraised, no antiques, no special stuff.
No, I mean, my wedding rings and my anniversary band, but
Okay.
That's not on the table. We're not
All
gonna,
right. All right. What about Madison? Talk to me about what issues you think arise with respect to Madison.
What issues do we think are going to arise?
Yeah. Are there any? Joe mentioned earlier he's seeking joint custody. In Ohio, Joe, we call that shared parenting.
Shared parenting.
Kentucky calls it joint custody. It's same animal.
Yeah.
Is there an issue there?
Well, yeah. I mean, she's going to have to be, shuttled back and forth between two houses, and
Is that something the two of you have already talked about or not?
one of
You
us
have
did
a
the talking
plan?
about it. One of us has a plan. He has the plan about what's going to happen.
So with
I'm going to stay in that
respect-
area. I don't
it's
want
like,
to
you
leave
know-
that area, so I wouldn't want to uproot her. I want to keep her life as consistent as we possibly can.
Good.
So wherever I end up is going to be, around her current high school.
Okay.
And
Good.
I would
Well,
hope
that's
that Sue would
great.
do the same, so that there's as little upheaval as possible.
So the first issue you're going to need to decide in your parenting plan is how you're going to share time with
Right.
Madison.
Right.
Okay.
And then we're talking about the regular week-to-week time, and then we're
Right.
talking about holidays and vacations.
And having talked to some friends who've been down this road, I mean, I know that weeks are, generally with divorced parents, it's one parent gets 4 days and the other gets 3, and then they flip that the next week. Is that
It's one option.
okay?
It's one option. There are lots of others.
Okay.
When you have a child as old as Madison, some folks decide it would be better 1 week at a
Smaller.
time.
Fine, thanks.
Other parents decide the 4 days gets so uncertain that they'd rather say every Monday and Tuesday with one parent, every Wednesday and Thursday with one parent.
Well, I guess we need to bring her
And
in
then
on that
flip
discussion.
them.
Then.
Actually, no.
No.
Actually, no. It's an interesting thing. Parents with the best of intentions often say just what you've said, Joe. Let's let Madison make this decision. And if you listen to child psychologists, they'll tell you just the opposite. They'll tell you don't give any decision making over to kids.
Right.
Because it puts them smack in the middle. They know the two of you aren't seeing things eye to eye. And for them to have to make that choice
Okay.
is really, they need the love of both of you.
Right. And they need their boundaries. She needs to say this is
Now, listening to
This is
them
good
is fine,
feedback. Yeah.
Listening to what they have to say. You don't want to turn them off.
Yeah.
But if you can then turn to Madison and say, your mom and I are talking about this, and when we've decided, we'll let you know. The reality of a 15-year-old, as you've already said, Joe, she'd much rather be with her friends most of the time.
Yeah.
But that is something that we're going to talk about. There are a lot of other pieces to the parenting plan that you're going to have to consider. I don't think you're going to have much trouble, frankly,
Okay.
figuring all that out. With the exception of support and with the exception of college, which you may see very differently. You're probably going to, in a half an hour, we're probably going to be able to figure out the parenting plan. Okay.
Okay.
With a 15-year-old, you don't have all that many
Right.
options.
right.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about what is probably going to be one of the tougher issues for you guys, and that's support. We've already mentioned it. Let's break it down just a little bit. I don't know to what extent you're aware, Joe, but spousal support is tax deductible for you. I don't know, you're probably in a blended rate of maybe 33% of your money goes to taxes. So every penny, every dollar that you pay in spousal support, you're literally paying 70 cents.
Can I ask, what would you consider a fair amount? I mean, what is
Well,
it you're looking for? Because
it's
this
premature to ask that question. it's premature to ask that question.
Well, if you're telling me that it's tax deductible, that would factor in that dollar amount. If you're telling me it's tax deductible, I mean,
Well, here's one thing you may want to consider. As far as the IRS is concerned, they don't care whether you pay child support or call it spousal support. Now, we do have a policy. The Supreme Court of Ohio has issued a child support guideline that would tell you what your child support obligation is. What's your gross income, Joe?
annually,
Yeah.
about 140.
Okay. The guidelines will tell you just exactly what your child support is. However, can't calculate it until you know what spousal support is.
Okay.
Yeah. And Joe, I see you're unease and you're concerned about spousal support. I may have made a miscalculation here that you knew more about divorce law than you actually do. I don't know. Have you looked at anything on the internet?
I've just talked to friends.
Okay.
I've been down this road.
And they've told you their war stories about spousal
You bet.
support?
You bet. I'm just shocked that this is even coming up, considering, I mean, I assumed that Sue would pick up more hours or get a real job or something like that. I mean, I've been working for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I've been raising kids for 25.
Yeah.
That was full
We've
time.
been raising kids for...
No, I've been raising kids.
Well, you both have taken care of your family, and it
Thank
sounds
you.
like you've done a good job. The spousal support statute, and it's probably time for me to talk with you about having a consultation with a lawyer about this. But the statute gives, I think, 13 different criteria that a court, that a judge,
So this is going to happen
Needs to
regardless. I mean, this is what you're saying to me.
am I saying to you that there is going to be a spousal support order on your case? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you guys are going to figure out what that should be.
Okay.
There is also, by the way, Sue, going to be some income imputed to you that may be more than you're currently earning.
Okay.
I don't know if you're only working 10 hours a week or only...
Yeah. Yeah.
So there will be some imputed income for you. But it'll probably be minimum wage until you have
It is
some
minimum.
greater
She
earning
makes
power.
$70 a week. I mean, she makes $70 a week.
Right.
It's not even gas money.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have a good relationship with him. Maybe he can give you more hours over there. So
Well, even more hours as a receptionist is probably not going to amount to more than $15,000 a year. Is minimum
Right.
wage in Ohio a little 15
Right.
to 16,000.
Right.
However, there is going to be an expectation that you will do what you can to enhance your earning ability
Okay.
in the future, which is why I talked to you earlier about looking into some options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can do that.
Well, you guys have done some good work. You must be exhausted. And let's spend some time scheduling a few more sessions. Okay. Do you have your calendars with you?
Oh, I didn't bring it with me right now, but I'm
But you
sure
can
that I
have
can.
it. You can
I can work
manage.
things out. I know pretty much what
Okay.
Madison's schedule is too, so I can work that out.
Well, typically, guys, I scheduled our sessions 2 weeks apart.
Okay.
I know you're eager to get this done, but in my experience, things work well when there is some time both for you to think things over, to
Right.
consult with whoever you
well,
may
yeah,
want to
obviously with
consult
this
And do a little research
Right.
that we need to do. Right.
I'm going to email you the names of some lawyers that I think you ought to at the very least have a consultation with.
Okay.
Tell them that you're in mediation that may call for a lesser retainer, because lawyers are asking for some pretty big
yeah.
retainers. But if they know you're mediating, that may be lessened.
Okay.
Make sure you don't call the same attorneys. But
Yeah.
I'll send you a list of 5 or 6.
Okay.
Okay.
And if possible, have a consultation before you come back the next time. Okay? All right.
All right.
Let me just say one other thing to you before you leave. A lot of folks think that once they've gotten the ball rolling here, the tension that existed in their home is going to diminish. Just the opposite typically happens, okay? The tensions rise. I can absolutely assure you that you are going to do things and say things that you later regret. It's a given. You are frail human beings. You're going to do things. You're going to say things. So perhaps having that expectation, you'll be able to cut each other a little slack, cut yourselves a little slack. Okay? And one other thing, sometimes folks think that they can speed up the process by talking these issues over in between sessions.
Okay.
For some people that works well. For most people, it doesn't.
Okay.
But I don't want to shut down conversations if you want to have them, but I'd like you to use these ground rules. If you start talking about any subject, and either one of you finds the temperature rising, finds it becoming really uncomfortable, you should say to the other, time out. We'll talk about this in mediation, and the other person must respect that. Okay? Otherwise, it's going to be miserable for Madison
Yes.
and miserable for the two of you.
Yes.
Okay? And I'm going to give you my card, which has got all of the various numbers and email addresses. If something comes up that I can be helpful on in between sessions, give me a call, send me an email. I'll try to get back to you within 24 hours.
Oh, terrific.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Be on your way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, welcome back.
Thanks.
It's been a couple of weeks since we've met. I always want to get current with folks and find out what's been going on in this last couple of weeks. Have the two of you been doing any talking about stuff?
Not much.
Not much. Well, that's okay.
Well, we were taking your advice to some extent. You said it.
Right. Sometimes it gets too tense.
Mm-hmm.
How about attorneys? Have either of you met with your counsel? Or you both have?
Yes.
Great. And who did you meet with?
Oh, Beth Silverman.
Aha. Okay. Good lawyer. And Joe?
Yes. I met with an attorney, and you were correct, obviously. And
She just wants to know his name.
oh, it's Ben Kalman.
Uh-huh. Ben Kelly.
Wow.
Okay. And was that a good fit for each of you? Did you feel you made a good connection with counsel?
Definitely.
And
definitely.
are relaxed and had a good
That's
conversation?
very professional. I mean, I'm not going to go out and play
Okay.
cards with him or anything, but
Okay. And they gave you a broad idea of what you can be anticipating and gave you some objective criteria that you could evaluate things
Yes.
by?
Yes.
Good. Good. Okay. Well, we have a lot of issues to work on. Have you decided, or would you like to choose a particular area that you'd like to get started in?
I think I'd like to start in the parenting issue.
Okay. Okay. Well, there are a
What's
couple
about-
of major
you all right with
areas.
that?
Is that okay with you?
it's fine.
Okay. There are a couple of major areas. There are a lot that are diddly. I'm assuming, Joe, that you will continue to have the kids on your health insurance?
Well, depending. I mean, Chloe is eligible as long as she's in school. Whether she continues in school or not is still to be decided. Madison, obviously, yes, will be as.
Okay.
Yep.
Madison is the only one the court is concerned about.
Okay. Yes. Well, then,
And
absolutely.
Madison
Yes.
will be on your coverage.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
So let me give you a quick rundown of some of the issues that you'll need to discuss to
Okay.
have in your parenting plan.
Okay.
I think we mentioned earlier the time-sharing arrangement, the regular one, the holidays, the vacations. You will have to decide whether or not the two of you are able, see yourselves in the future as being able to jointly make major decisions about your kids, but really just Madison, as far as, again, this parenting plan just covers Madison.
Right.
And
But we
there
only
are not
have
that many.
3 years or so before she's a legal adult.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah, but she's not going to turn 18 and we turn her out. You know, I mean, we still have
but it-
No, but
decisions
since
to
all
make.
this is-
Joe is ready. Joe is right.
Thank
Excuse
you.
me. That for this plan, we're just taking Madison
Yeah,
through
it's all about
18
legalese at
and
this point.
completed high school.
Okay.
Unless, of course, you decide to have a college clause down the road, and we're going to talk more about that.
Okay.
But next to time sharing, an important decision you have to make is whether or not you're going to be able to make joint decisions about the major concerns. Now, they're not that many, because in your individual homes, if you say no homework, no TV until you've done your homework, and
Right.
you say relax for an hour with TV, you're autonomous going forward with your daughter, and you will
Okay.
make. But the major decisions are where she goes to school, and it didn't seem like there was much conflict about that.
Right. She's going to stay at the
Previously.
same high school. Yeah.
For some parents, religious education, not for others. We're talking health and safety, welfare, elective medical. For wellness care, you're probably going to keep doing whatever you're doing.
Right.
In emergencies, whoever has your daughter, you're going
Right.
to get her to the ER to get stitched up or a bone set. But wellness care, elective medical
Plastic
is
surgery?
something. Yeah. Interesting you mentioned that. That often comes up with teenage girls. Would
That's
you
not
believe
happening,
it?
yeah.
But there are some areas in which parents really do not see things eye to eye. Whether to medicate for ADD. Now, you may be past that. You may be past all those uncertainties. But we're really talking about elective. Have you already passed orthodontia? Okay. So you may not have any difficulty. Do you see yourselves as being able to jointly make decisions in those areas where she goes to school, elective medical? I haven't heard you mention religion, so I'm assuming that's not a big issue.
It's not a big issue.
Okay, well then there will be a clause
Okay.
in your plan that says parents will jointly make all major decisions regarding the child's general health and welfare. Now, you brought up something last time about things. Is that a concern?
It is a concern. It is a concern for me. She is really not that interested in driving. Being 15 and a half, I'm, trying to get her into some driver's ed classes, and she just doesn't seem to have a care about that. She has a lot of friends right now who drive, so I don't know that is really an issue.
What are you talking about? She talks about driving all the time. We've actually gone out and looked at cars. I told her I was going to buy her a car, and I frankly would prefer that she be in control of a vehicle instead of, if you've seen her friend Ashley driving around our neighborhood, it's life-threatening to everybody in the neighborhood. So I would much prefer that she go through a driver's education and get her own vehicle and be in charge of her own transportation.
I know you want to answer this, Sue, but I have to tell you, it is not at all unusual for a child, especially a teenager, to tell you one thing and to tell you one thing. That it's just their way. It's not even necessarily manipulation. It's how they're managing
It's a lot of manipulation.
conflicted parents, and they want to be sure they're tight with you and they're tight with you, and they know how you feel. You're kind of anxious about it, and you're
Right.
anxious for her to start driving. So she's picking up on that. It still needs to be a decision that the two of you make and tell her about. You don't want to keep her giving you different mixed messages too long. But tell me, Joe, why do you think it's important that she learn to drive and have a car?
Well, she's going to have 2 separate homes in a matter of months, and you know, my hours are fairly long sometimes. I'm not always going to be available to pick her up and take her to places.
When is her 16th birthday?
It's about 6 months away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think given the trauma that she's going through with this divorce, it's the least we can offer her. I mean, it's something that I think would go a long way towards,
Well,
placating.
Thanks, Joe. What is your reluctance about her driving?
It's not so much that I'm reluctant that she drive, but she has said to me that she doesn't
I
want to drive.
understand.
And so maybe that's not really how she's feeling. But on that issue, I don't think that we should just give her a car to make her feel better about us getting a divorce.
It's not just that. It's not just that. I mean, she's turning 16. That's a big milestone, and this is something we bond over. I have an interest in motorized vehicles, and something we share.
How old were the other kids before they started driving?
They were
Jo-
both 16.
They were both 16.
Yeah.
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 Well, if
But they
you-
didn't just get a car. They didn't just.
No, they didn't get a car.
wait,
Right,
That's right.
I understand.
They also didn't go through a divorce, so
But that you can't just give her a car.
not just
and
giving her a
say-
car. Not
Yes,
giving
you
her
just
a car.
said you were gonna
Well,
give her a
But there's
car.
extenuating circumstances now. That we were all in a single home then. Joe and Chloe both were. That was, as you pointed out last time, several times. That was your role. You were the mother and chauffeur. So now there's 2 separate households. Assuming Sue's going to be working more.
Yeah.
But I also want to bring. Can I
suppose-
just bring up an issue that he mentioned just
When?
a minute ago? Just a minute ago, you said that you were going to be working longer hours and you
I
weren't going
said
to
I
be able
do
to
work
pick her.
longer
You
hours.
do
My-
work. Excuse me. Oh, excuse
I'm not
me.
planning on
You do already,
Or-
and have been in the past.
and you know that.
Working longer hours. So if she has a car, you're expecting her to stay at your place alone? She's not going to do that. If she has a car, she's a teenager, she's going to be out and running until you come home.
When does she have time, Sue? She goes to school. She's got lacrosse till 6, 7 o'clock at night. Then she does homework. I mean, that's her schedule now. That's not going to change.
If you give her her own car,
So you don't trust her. That's new.
Sue, let me ask you a question. If you assume that, as your other children did,
right?
that Madison's going to want to drive at 16, even though perhaps she's telling you at 15 she doesn't. If you assume that she would be driving,
Right.
what requests would you make be part of the protocol for driving that you and Joe would ultimately agree upon?
Good question.
What would be your and maybe you need some time to think about that. But are there certain boundaries or limits that you'd like to put on the use of the car, or what's your thinking?
I would, I don't want to see her load up the car with friends. And I know that you're not allowed to when you're under 17. You can only have one other person. But
Excuse me just a minute. So Joe, you'd agree with that? That she would be limited to the number of people that
Oh, absolutely.
she
I
would...
mean, that's the law.
Okay, so one thing that you...
We're also talking about a very mature
just
child.
please let her
Yeah, but I'm trying to find out from Sue what would make this palatable.
Okay.
Because I can understand, and a youngster of 16 is probably able to be at home without a parent present
Yeah.
until Joe gets home from work. I mean, you'd understand that. But what else concerns you? Let's assume that you both agree she can only drive with one other person. Is that the current law?
Yes.
In the car, and
Yes.
that she is expected to adhere to that, and you'd
Right.
both monitor that. What else would you be worried about that you'd want to address?
I guess I'm just worried about her seeing this divorce as about her, this car, just giving her a car because we're going through a divorce. makes it seem about her, and it's not about her. It's not about any of the kids. It's nothing that they have done. It's between us. And if we
I
say
think you're right.
you know,
You're absolutely right. And I think one of the responsibilities you both have is to reassure her more than once that she is not the cause of or has nothing to do
Right.
with the divorce. Beyond that, she's living in the real world.
Yes.
She is going to be living, as you say, Joe, in 2 separate houses.
right, right.
And you are more than likely also going to be working full-time in the near future. So she is going to have some responsibility to get herself to and from places on her own. And I don't want to put you on the hot seat to come up with everything that you might be concerned about. Give it some thought. There may be some
Okay.
other requests
Okay.
that you might make to see if Joe would be willing to
I don't want her
agree.
on the phone when she's, and that's easy to check. You know, I mean, you can check the hours that the phone's.
What
used.
other boundaries would you set for Madison?
Well, the phone certainly is a biggie for me. I mean, it's
Not talking while on
not
the
talking,
phone.
texting. No, that phone goes off when you're behind the wheel. I've told her that, and she knows that. As I said, she's an extraordinarily mature child, and she's actually taking all of this. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
you've
have
never
you given-
taken a call while you're driving her around.
I'm not talking about me. We're talking about her. I've been driving for 35 years. I've never had an accident. Yeah, I take a call.
But you're setting a precedent there. You're saying,
No,
oh, it's okay
no.
for me and it's not
Sue,
okay for you.
Sue, we're talking about protocols for Madison.
That's right.
We are. I understand that we'd all be safer if nobody talked on the phone when they're driving. Okay, that's a given. And you'll think about it and see if
Put
you have
makeup
any
on
other
when you're driving.
concerns about the driving. I don't know how either one of you feel about her driving at night and whether you're going to impose a curfew
She has a
on when
curfew.
she'd get
Yeah.
home. And, you know, no court can make you do that.
Right.
But to the extent you're able to come to some meeting of the minds on the major guidelines
Right.
for your child,
Right.
so much the better.
This kind of thing, the rules of what our daughter can or cannot do in a car is going to be in our divorce settlement.
Well, it depends. It could be. Are you...
Or it's something that we can work out.
Well, that's what
Right.
we're doing.
Right.
Right, that's what we're
I
doing.
just, it
It's
sounded
just-
like she was saying
You
that
can-
actually would be in the fine print, and that's just
Oh,
baffling to me.
Well, you know, it's an interesting animal, this shared parenting plan,
Mm-hmm.
because whatever you decide to put in it, you'll put in it.
Mm.
You have to cover 14 different
Yeah, I guess you don't want to have this
points,
stuff. You know, you'd
Right.
better to overreach than.
But
in this
nobody's
situation.
going to look over your shoulder and tell you you're not following this or you're not following that. It's
Right.
really for your purposes once you get there. And I don't know, Joe, are you expecting to put Madison on your insurance
For the car?
as a driver?
Oh, sure. I don't have a problem doing that.
Because that's a major expense.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Do I lose mine?
Pardon me?
Do I lose mine?
Lose.
My driver's insurance, my auto insurance.
You will have to get insurance
You
on
have to
your
pay
own.
for it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the title of the car needs to be put.
The title
Oh,
in the
might be okay.
car typically is in one parent's name.
No, I mean my car.
Oh, your car. You will have your car in your own name. If it's a joint title now, it's
Yeah.
going to be transferred.
It's actually just in his.
Well, then it
They're both
definitely
mine.
is going to be transferred.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, getting back to the parenting plan, it sounds as though you will be able to work something out here on the driving issue. You may have some other
Yeah.
points to bring up next time that you want to add.
Okay.
Health insurance will be with you. We will have to decide, you will have to decide how you're going to pay Madison's uncovered medical expenses. I don't know what your copays are or what's covered and what's not. That's another piece that you're going to have to put together, and we'll wait maybe until we know what the support arrangements are
Okay.
before you make that decision. There's going to be what we call a non-relocation clause in your shared parenting plan. The typical clause reads, neither parent shall permanently, important word, remove the child from and you can name what the area is, the jurisdiction of the court, the greater Cincinnati area, the state of Ohio. You guys can decide what you want that to be. Neither parent can permanently remove the child from the jurisdiction, whatever you define, without the consent of the other parent or an order of the court.
Okay.
So if you should remarry and your husband is transferred to Chicago,
Right.
and you're moving and you want Madison to move with you, that's only going to happen if Joe consents or if you can convince a court to allow you to do that.
This raises a good point. You talk about Sue remarrying, and I don't know what her relationship is with the vet, but can this be in the parenting plan somewhere about, the idea of somebody coming in and out of the house, seeing her romantically, and our daughter being exposed to that? I mean, how do you cover something like that?
What is it that you're concerned about?
I'm concerned about, 2 days after our divorce papers are signed, that this guy moves into our house.
Oh, for crying out
That's what
loud.
I'm concerned about.
All right.
And her being
Well,
exposed
I'm
to that.
sure that you did talk with your lawyer about what the events are that would terminate spousal support. Did you talk about that?
I just kind of got the overview of, the percentages and the salary differential, and so this would be grounds for that ending spousal.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
Typically,
You listening?
the spousal support would end
Okay.
in the event that Sue remarries or cohabits.
Or
Now,
cohabits, okay.
cohabitation is a word of art. It isn't having somebody spend the weekend.
Right.
It's a substantial relationship that has some obligation of support connected to it. But I heard you really bringing up a different concern here, Joe.
Yes.
Your concern being that you, in the event that Sue develops an important relationship with someone else, that you did not want. Maybe you need to finish that sentence. You did not want what?
I don't want Madison, having to, be exposed to that.
What does that mean?
Whatever that encompasses, whatever sexual relations are going on.
It's not a sexual relationship.
Not now.
Sue,
It might
we're
not be
talking
now.
hypothetically. Okay. So when you say you don't want her exposed to that, I still don't know what that means. Surely,
well, I
if-
said Madison's handled this very well, but again, in my hypothetical, 2 days after our divorce, this guy starts coming over and spending the night. I think that's going to really shake her up.
Do you?
I do.
What do you base that on?
What do I base that on? I think my daughter loves me, and I think that as good as she's been about this, it's going to be very painful to see Daddy replaced, or that that she may view it that way. So, and I don't know. And since it seems like so much of this goes in the fine print, I'm just wondering whether that can be covered somehow.
It could be.
Okay. Because
The
I would
court-
like it to.
It's not something the court would address,
But in here,
but it's something the two of you could come to terms on. And would you see that as a reciprocal understanding that would go both ways?
I would never do that. Yeah, I have no. There's nobody else in my life.
Well, that's at the moment. That isn't going to be forever. But just tell me what it is that you would be requesting of Sue.
Okay, when she has custody, when Madison is at her house, it would be my preference that there not be gentleman callers. I don't know what they're, whatever, or
And
boyfriends.
by the same token, if
Sure,
if
you can
Madison
put that in
was
there,
at
absolutely.
your house, you
Yep.
won't have
I would not be
female guests.
That's correct.
What do you think about
She's
that,
my
Sue?
female guest. My daughter is my female guest.
I think that is totally preposterous.
Well, let's not.
Yes, okay, down the road, should I remarry or something? That's fine. That's not happening in the foreseeable future, especially not in the next 2.5 years.
So are you saying you wouldn't have a problem with the restriction that Joe is talking about?
I would. Actually, I would have a problem with
Well,
that.
tell us why.
Because right now,
I know
it's
it.
all about him.
No,
I
no.
guess.
How's that about me?
I don't
I'm
think
talking
so.
about our daughter.
It is
That's what
about
we're gonna
you
expose our
in the
daughter
fact
to.
that you see yourself as being replaced.
I said that's
And-
how she would view it.
You have no idea how Madison thinks. You've not spent enough time with her, nor were you ever a teenage girl. So you have no idea what it is that she thinks or how she views you.
So, Sue, let's say for the sake of argument, you're right. Joe doesn't know how Madison would actually, in fact, react to this.
Right.
He has some thoughts about it.
Right.
He's conjecturing about it. He's making a request of you. I want you to respond to the request.
I would not I do not want to have this restriction put upon an unnamed
So she
person
keeps
or
saying
an
it's
Joe.
unnamed relationship. Does this mean that I cannot have male friends to the house while she's there to see her mother having an adult, healthy relationship? It doesn't have to be sexual. Just to have how adults should behave.
Remind me, Joe, when you made your request,
Mm-hmm.
was it that no one would spend the night? Did you say that? Or am I dreaming that?
I don't know where these male friends of hers are coming from. I'm
Doesn't
only talking
matter,
about the one
Joe.
guy.
It doesn't matter. Well, are you really only talking about this one guy? Or are you, Madison's going to be home for the next 3 years.
Right. Can you keep a guy out of your house can you wait 3 years? Two
We're
and a
not
half
talking,
years?
I want to know specifically what it is you're requesting.
Okay, what am I requesting? Then I would say when either of us has custody, that adults of the opposite sex not be allowed in the house. I mean, how well
If
would
a furnace repairman comes to the house, I
she's
can't
a
let him
16-year-old
in?
girl. Why would you invite any men into the house?
Because
That's just
they're
not
my
a good idea.
friends.
Who are these guys? What friends?
All right, Joe, that's a pretty broad request.
Okay. Well,
And
then
it would
maybe
be
you can
broad for
winnow
you
us
as well.
down.
It would be very broad for you as well.
I don't
wonder if
intend
you
to
can
have
narrow
anybody.
it.
I look forward to having time with my daughter. As my wife pointed out, I haven't always been around, so.
Yeah, but 6 months from now, you might have someone who was eager to meet your daughter. Is that going to be not allowed to take place inside the?
Okay, well, I guess for the purposes of the documentation, we'll keep it to spending the night,
Okay.
or
So
with
how
it,
do you
or after
feel
the
about
hours
that,
of
Sue?
11 or
If
something.
you had a male friend who is spending the night, what Joe is requesting is that if it's a night, that Madison is also at your home.
Right.
Now again, I told you both, court doesn't care about this stuff unless you could actually prove
Right.
to a court that this was emotionally damaging to the child, which is not easy to do. However, that doesn't mean you can't reach an accord on this if you choose to. What the research has been showing us is that divorce is not the hardest thing on kids. What is even harder is that they make attachments to new adults. And those new attachments, girlfriend, boyfriend, those new attachments can be very fleeting. Just after they really get to know someone that you have been caring about and have had around,
Break
she
up.
disappears. Your friend disappears. The lack of any permanence for the kid can be pretty distressing. Now that's probably truer with younger children, because by the time somebody's 15, they may be well used to meetings and breakups, their own and their friends. But still, it's something to think about. But do you think that for the next 3 years, you might be willing to consider Joe's request that when you have a male friend visiting and staying the night, because that's the only restriction we've got here,
Right.
that you would not do that when Madison is scheduled to be with you in your residence?
In theory, I guess that sounds good, but I don't know what my life is going to hold for me. And I may make friends with people from out of town who are coming in. I don't laugh, you know? I mean,
suddenly you have
I'm
male
trying
friends there,
to
now
get
they're
my
out of
own
town.
life.
I mean, this is like this
Joe,
mythical
These
life.
are friends, Joe.
Joe,
These
Sue
are
is trying
friends.
to
Okay, I'm sorry.
talk this
Go
through.
ahead. Go ahead.
And, you know, I mean, I just don't want to feel like I have to call and get his permission.
You wouldn't
or
have permission.
not.
It'd be undocumented.
Yeah.
Well, would you agree, Joe, that if there was an unexpected guest arriving at Sue's house, to meet your request of not having someone spend the night,
Sure, I'd come and get Madison
That
if she could spend the
Madison
night.
could
When
stay
some of
with
her
you.
hypothetical male friends from out of state have to spend the night because of a life or death circumstance, sure, I'll drive over and take Madison to my house for the night.
I mean,
Yeah, we can work that out.
I think I can understand why you feel a need to be sarcastic about this.
Well-
but it may not be getting you where you want to go.
Okay.
Just consider that.
Okay.
So if you did have an unexpected guest, and you gave Joe a call and said, would you please call Madison and ask her if she'll spend the night at your place? And he said, sure. Would that resolve it for you? I know you find this offensive in some way.
I do.
And I'm not absolutely sure why, and I don't know that I need to go there. But it would be good if you could reach a reciprocal
Thank you.
understanding here. Don't have to. You can simply say no. But you know, as the months and years go by, you are both going to need to accommodate to each other. You're going to be asking favors of Joe. He's going to be asking favors of you. It's a given. So to the extent you can design something that would allow
This is
for
for our
that,
daughter. What we're talking about
you're
is
probably smarter. Yeah. I know it's hard to listen to the sarcasm. It's even hard for me, Joe.
sorry.
But it's a tense time. I understand that. Okay. Well, think about
I guess
that.
this is not an issue I should dig my heels in over. I understand.
Well, for now, let's look at all the rest of the
All right.
pieces. But
All
for
right.
now, perhaps Sue will agree for a reciprocal clause, which you may decide to put into your plan or not.
Okay.
Okay. There's going to be a need to determine who takes the tax dependency exemption for Madison. I imagine you're still able to claim Chloe. I don't know about your son. But one way you could address that is to take it alternately. By the time, until she's 17.
Why would I? I mean, I'm going to be giving up a huge chunk of my income. Wouldn't I be entitled to the and paying child and alimony, child support and spousal support? Wouldn't I be entitled to the deduction to keep that?
I don't know what you mean by entitled. It's something to be negotiated. You mean, would the court automatically give it to you?
Yeah.
No.
Jeez.
But they might alternate it, which is typically what is done. And I don't know where we're going to end up on spousal support.
Okay.
That will make a big difference because, do you do your own tax returns?
I don't know.
Or do you have an accountant do your tax returns?
We have an accountant do it.
Yeah, because there's both the dependency exemption and the child credit, and they have to go together. And that's income determinative. If your income is over, I think it's $75,000, which it may not be after you pay spousal
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
Then you don't get the same value out of it. The
Okay.
wise thing to do is to have a financial planner look at that and see who would best
Another
take
finger in the
advantage
pie
of
there.
it.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
alternate it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about a clause that you either can choose to have or not, but it came up in one of our earlier discussions. You indicated, Sue, you'd like to have a college clause.
Yes.
Let me very quickly tell you what all the pieces of that would be.
Okay.
If you decide to have one, and Joe, it's up to you to either agree or not. You want to know whether you're talking about 4 years of college education for a baccalaureate or 5. Some courses are requiring 5 years,
Right,
some fields
right.
of study. You want to know whether it has to be immediately after high school, those years, or do you allow for a year out if a kid isn't motivated for a year or so?
Right.
And perhaps most importantly, you want to put a cap on it. You know, if Madison gets into Yale Drama School and it's $75,000 a year, you're certainly not wanting to obligate yourself legally to that kind of expense. So everybody puts a cap. And the cap could be UC, the cap could be Ohio State, it could be Miami, whatever you choose. And then you need to decide how you're going to contribute to that sum. Equally, proportionate to your income at the time. And income would, if you're receiving spousal support, that
That's
adds
income.
to your income
Right.
and takes out from yours.
Right.
So those are all the pieces. And briefly, let me tell you, lawyers take very different positions on this. A lot of lawyers will say, don't do it. If you
At
have,
all.
At all. If you consider it a moral obligation to help your kid in college, then help your kid in college. Don't turn it into a legal obligation.
Oh, all right.
Other lawyers, and frankly, this was my position when I was representing individuals, think it's a good idea for two reasons. I always thought it was a good idea. Down the road, even though neither of you can believe it will ever happen, you are going to remarry or enter into a committed relationship with someone else. You are. And if it happens when Madison's in college and you want to pay for her college or some portion of it, and you've tied up with somebody who says, I put myself through college and it was character building and there is no way our income is going to go for that. If you have a college clause, you say, it's a court order. End of conversation.
Okay.
The other thing is, I don't know to what extent Madison's aware of the plans you made for her siblings for college, but she knows that one of them completed it, another one's there.
Right.
It can be very comforting for kids to know that when their parents split up, they made a plan. So that when she starts thinking more seriously about it,
Yeah.
she's not going to you and you say, go see your father, and you
Right.
say, go see your mother. So
Right.
I don't know if you need time to think about
Okay.
that some more, or whether you want to talk about it now.
Well, I don't. Yeah, we might not. I don't know. I mean, she's a terrific athlete, and it's her hope that she can get some kind of help through athletic scholarship. And I see no reason. I mean, she's, there's people already coming to watch her play as a freshman.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. But I obviously can't bank on something like that. So.
Yeah. Where does that take you?
Beg pardon?
Where does the knowledge that she might get an athletic scholarship take you in this decision?
Whether to fund something like this or not.
I mean, you could say we will contribute after all financial aid, scholarship, whatever has been expended.
Right. Right.
Phrasing it like that would be helpful, yeah. So it seems like something we would need to start funding now, right?
Well, that's an individual decision you'll make. Some people, yes. Some people say, I've got to start saving right now because I know I've got this commitment 3 years down the road. Other people say, I don't have the money to start saving right now, but
Yeah.
I'll take it out of the house equity if I need to.
Yeah.
It's an individual decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why Sue talks about
Okay.
staying in the house. I mean, that is Madison's college fund right there, that house. And so
That is the way you're thinking of it? Your half of it
it's
would
either
be...
that or my income's about to get slashed in half, and that's our biggest asset.
Next to your retirement.
Or I borrow against my retirement. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So you have two
It's-
options.
What's your thoughts, Sue, about college?
I can
I
sacrifice or I can sacrifice. Those are my two options.
It was interesting the way I threw my voice way over there to answer your question, wasn't it? Okay.
What's your thinking?
My thinking is that we definitely should put a college clause in, and I'd say we can put a cap on it, and it would make
And you'll contribute out of your spousal support?
Yes. Yes, out of my income.
Your income, right.
And
That would be county.
the child support that he will be paying ends at her 18th birthday,
If she's completed high school by
if she's
then.
completed high school by then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so it looks as though you may want to actually have a college clause. And for payment, what are you thinking? Pro rata income?
That's what I would think.
I know you see yourself, Joe, as paying spousal support forever, but it may not be the case, in which case your income relative to Sue's could be significantly greater. While you're paying spousal support, it won't be
No.
that big a differential. But if Sue should remarry in 2 years, the income differential could be significant. New partner income doesn't count, okay?
Hmm.
Well, I think actually the other pieces of your shared parenting plan, except for how you plan to share time, we have to go back to that. How do you plan for her to share her time?
I have a very good friend who is has been doing this for a couple years, and they do a whole week, a week on and a week off. So
Some people who do that find it too long a period, and they provide for a midweek dinner hour when you can catch up with your kid.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, with my schedule, you know, my quality time with Madison are going to be the weekends, you know, and that would be, you know, it'd be preferential to me to have her Thursday through Sunday or Friday through Sunday. I don't know how that works for you, but that.
You mean every week?
Yeah.
Well, it's an option. How do you feel about not having weekend time?
well, it's not that I'm not having. I feel like it's going to put me in the spot of being the bad guy again, because I'm going to be the one that's going to say, you have to get your homework done, you have to work on your paper before you can do this, and then he's going to get her for the weekend when it's all joy and pancakes.
How would you like it to be?
I would like to have a whole week on, and I would like to have a whole week off. And I know that her life is changing, but it doesn't change so fast, or maybe it changes too fast for her, that a midweek dinner with him, if he can schedule it, is not going to make that much of a difference.
Not make that much of a difference
If
to...
to her, or he's not going to lose a whole week's worth of information by not seeing her for an entire week.
Well, I'm making the assumption that you're going to be working full-time before
Yes.
too long.
Yes.
You both are. So you're both not going to have a lot of midweek time.
But the
Do you
Well, and
typically
she's-
get home in the evenings?
I do. It's anywhere 7, 8
Late.
o'clock. But now with Madison's academic and sports schedule, she's out the door at 6:37 and usually not home until around the same time in the evening, 6:37. But I you know, this.
So you won't be missing a lot of time with her because
Right.
she's
But I
out
just
with
but
her
think for
once
friends.
those-
once this season ends, she's got a lot of downtime.
You mean once the sports...
Once this lacrosse season ends,
But she does club in the summertime and things. That's also been my role. Is on the weekends when she does her club, I go to those. I'm able to attend those games, and you know I'd hate.
Well,
I'd hate
what
to
I
lose
think
that.
you're hearing Sue say is she's not willing to give up all of her weekends.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Most parents
unfortunately.
aren't.
Right.
Most parents aren't. So 1 week at a time is one option. What other option, aside from your having all the weekends, would you request?
Oh boy, I don't know.
Tell me what you would find hard about 1 week at a time, because you would have a full weekend every other week, as well as all the night times and the getting up in the morning and whatever that entails.
It just seems very disruptive. I mean, each week is so radically different. The week with the daughter and everything that entails, and the getting up and you know, there's going to be, I know there's meetings and there's social events that I have some nights where I'm not going to make it home till 11 or so. Then that next week I have all that time, and I won't have anybody around. So it seems such a,
Yeah, it's
I don't know
one
why
of the
we can't
hardest
split it,
things
yeah.
about divorce,
No-
you know.
no question about
that
that,
you
yeah.
start sharing time when you had so much of it. You could rely on each other to take
I also
over.
I frankly don't want to go a week without seeing her, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
this is,
Which you would not have to do, and you said earlier you try. I know you can't always do it, but you try to get to
Yeah.
all of her games, and you'll see her then, even when it's.
was that
Sue's-
allowable? Is that
oh,
allowable?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Sure.
It's my first divorce. Sorry, I don't know how it works.
Don't
Well, do
have
you
to
think,
be so
Sue?
mean.
Sue, do you have any other options besides the 1 week at a time that you want to put on the table?
You know, a friend of mine who's divorced, they do I think I said this last time. They do 4 days and 3 days, and then the next week they flip that.
That's another option.
Mm-hmm.
What's your response to that one?
That just seems. I know Madison, and that that would just be so confusing for her. She would just not get that.
Well, one thing you
At
could do
all.
is try it out. I don't know when you're planning to separate. We haven't really
Right.
nailed that down. But there's no reason that you can't try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you
Yeah.
can shift gears and do something else.
Yeah.
I said this already, and you both shook your heads. She's really not going to want to spend that much time with
I
either
know.
one of you.
I know.
She's going to want to be with her
I know.
friends. So,
But she's got a lot of work ahead of her. She's got a lot of AP courses that she's taking. And,
yeah.
I mean, she's really doing very well.
Good.
And I know this is going to just
You'd be
make her
surprised.
crazier than she already is.
Kids are very resilient.
Yeah, they
Kids
are.
very
They
resilient.
are.
Would you be willing to give a try to the 1 week? Try it out.
Well, I thought we
see
were
how
going
it
to
goes?
try the 4-day, 3-day thing.
Well, we could try.
I
either
just don't
one.
think Madison's gonna.
Well, yeah, that's what you said, but you know, and
But trying it out will be one way you'll find out. How long a trial period do you think would be necessary?
I think it would probably be advantageous to try it while she's not in school, because once school hits, I think she's just going to be, I left my geometry book at Dad's and I need it for tomorrow because it was a third day and I thought it was a fourth day, and
well, I thought
she just
geographically
is crazy.
we were going to try to stay in the same vicinity.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
I hope
not
you
that
are.
big.
Well,
but I
So
mean,
that's not that
you
big.
know,
If we're all in Blue Ash, it's not that.
Would you
big of-
consider, Joe,
Mm-hmm.
a set day of every week? I mean, splitting it up, Monday, Tuesday, and with one parent, Wednesday, Thursday with the other parent, alternating Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That way,
That might work. That might work.
Madison
Then
might
I could
find
get,
it a little
yeah,
less
I
confusing.
could set up
Kids
work.
do
Mhm.
wake up in the morning wondering, where am I supposed to be today?
right.
If they know the day of the week.
Okay.
It's one
Well,
thing
let's
to
give that one a
consider.
try, and she might be able to deal with that one since she
Some
can.
regularity.
Yeah.
She's going to ask you about it,
Yeah.
and maybe she already has, and you're just going to say, "We'll let you know. We'll
What's her
let you
biggest
know
concern?
as soon as we
It is,
know."
yeah.
Have you given further thought as to when you're going to separate and have different residences? Because that's one thing, you can't really try it until then.
Well, that comes down to this issue of the
The
house.
dollars and
Well, again.
what
I mean,
issue
this
with the
is-
house?
Sue wants to keep the house. She wants to maintain and live in this 5-bedroom house by herself, and
With
it's our biggest
Madison.
asset. And we're getting hit with all these costs, and it just seems unnecessary and silly to me. I mean, I'd like to resolve that, so then we know we could put it on the market. We could both get out of there, and hopefully, if it's vacant and ready to go, it's going to sell.
Were you planning to buy or rent?
No, I was going to rent until I can.
So does
figure things
that
out.
lessen the importance of selling it right away at a loss, perhaps?
Well, but these costs are just astronomical with the lawyers and you know, your financial planner. You're talking about setting up this college fund and things like this, and it's just, I mean,
Okay,
I think
well,
we
maybe
need access to that money.
Maybe we need to table that issue.
I think we need to
until-
resolve that issue. I think
Well, of course,
tabling
we
is
do
helpful.
ultimately need to solve that issue.
Yep.
But what's your monthly mortgage payment?
It's about $1,200, $1,280, something like that.
Okay. It's not going to be very easy to find a nice place to rent for a whole lot less than that. But we can shelve it for now and see what kind of income you're going to have available for each of you
Right.
by shifting gears at this point.
Okay.
You've done good work here. I think you've worked out a lot of the pieces.
Good.
This one is still up in the air, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be advantageous for Madison to stay in the house at least until she graduates from high school. I had said that before.
Yeah.
Just because this whole thing is so unstable.
Well, but she's
Yeah.
going to have 2 homes.
I understand
You're
that.
saying you think one of those should be the house.
Yeah.
Well, there is some support for that in the psychology world.
Yeah.
To not have too much change all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're gonna, you know, give her a car.
Yeah.
So then she's gonna be. I mean, I just think she needs someplace.
Do you understand,
stable.
Joe, your entitlement to your share of the equity in the house? When you met with your attorney and discussed that, you do understand that that will ultimately be coming to you.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned earlier that you were thinking of it as a
And
college
they talked about
fund.
it. She would give me a promissory note or an IOU or something like that. But see, I can't. That doesn't pay for anything in the interim. I mean, it's just, you know, something that a promise that there's money coming 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road. And even then, who knows what the economy's going to be like? I mean, you know, the housing
Well, but
market's...
your equity share would be frozen today. At the fair market, you'd have to have come to an agreement
Right.
on what the
Right.
fair market value of the house is.
But I don't see that money until the sale.
That's
So
true.
that's...
Did your lawyer talk to you about the policy of the court on the forced sale of a house?
The forced sale of a house?
You didn't get into that. You probably didn't have time to.
No, again, I mean, I'm hoping through this process that we would come to an amenable solution, but
Well, you are going to. I'm sure you will. But it's sometimes helpful to know what would happen if I walked away from the negotiating table.
Right.
And when there is a minor child,
mm-hmm.
our court doesn't require immediate payout of equity because there is
Right.
an assumption that there is stability there. They don't allow it to go on for more than 5 years, but by then Madison be gone anyway.
Right. Right.
Okay. Well, why don't we shelve this issue,
Right.
knowing we have to return to it
Okay.
and shift gears, and next time when we get back together, we'll delve into the support issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
See
Take
you in
care.
2 weeks.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it's already on the calendar.
All right. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Well, guys, how's it been?
Oh, it's been all right.
Good,
It's been all right.
good, good. Things are kind of simmering down a bit.
A little bit.
Good.
Good couple
That's
weeks.
great. That's wonderful. You guys are really doing a good job here. This is hard, hard, hard stuff.
It is.
And the fact that you've gotten as far as you have thus far is really speaks well for both of you. So, good work. We're going to touch on the toughest issue, and I guess you both realized it going in. Support is almost always a difficult issue, and it has been here, and you've collected some information that was a little shocking and upsetting, but there you are. Okay. Are you willing to share with each other what it is you learned from your attorneys when you met? Did they talk to you about how long a term of support you could expect? What the ranges are? Because I'm sure no good attorney is going to tell you exactly what the outcome is going to be in this
Right.
area.
Right.
Yeah. So for a moment, let's assume that child support can work out. either we're going to fit it into the spousal or it's going to be separate by formula, and it is what it is.
Okay.
What did you learn, Sue, about spousal support? What's your current thinking based on what you learned?
Well, I know I'm going to have to get a full-time job, and I'm also going to see about taking some classes to further my education to maybe get something that, while it's still full-time, would be paying a lot more or a bit more. Or just
Have you
more.
identified what area you want to go into?
I have not. I'm thinking maybe something in the healthcare field, but I've not really pinpointed what it is exactly that I
Okay.
want to do with
Okay.
that. Yeah. And so I know that will be some income, but then I'm also going to have to pay for classes, so that is going to have to be worked out also. And my lawyer said that I should probably be leaning towards the 40% in the spousal support, just because of the range of the marriage, it being over 25 years.
40%
Of
the
the
differential in your
differential.
incomes?
Yes.
And did she talk to you about term?
She said she said nowadays, people are putting a limit of like maybe 10 years on it, instead of it just being, forever. So she said 10 years would be a reasonable.
That would take you to 65.
Mhm.
Okay. Did she explain to you your entitlement to Social Security, even though you may not have gotten your own 40 quarters in? You can draw through Joe's Social Security. It
Yes.
doesn't diminish.
Yes.
It doesn't diminish your entitlement at all. But okay. How about you, Joe? What did you learn?
Somewhat similar information about the differential and the percentages, though I was advised not to give any more than 30%. And I'm glad to hear Sue say 10 years. I know that some people pay in perpetuity, and so I think I would be amenable to 10 years, but I certainly wouldn't. I don't think more, given the child support, I don't think giving more than 30%, especially if she's going to stay in the house, and seems more than fair.
Okay, I haven't talked to you yet, and this gets a little bit complicated, but it is important that you understand it. If a court were to make the decision about what your spousal support is going to be,
Right.
the clause would be X dollars for X years, subject to further modification by the court. What that really means is, if anything changes, if there's a significant change in your circumstances, inheritance, new job, either one of you would have the right to go back to court and say, well, this is what it was, but now there's been a change in circumstances and my spousal support should go down.
Mm-hmm.
My spousal support should go up. A lot of folks in mediation decide they don't like living with that degree of uncertainty.
Right.
And they'd like, if at all possible, to enter into an agreement that they could count on. Now, we know that there are certain contingencies that would terminate spousal support. The three that the IRS says is death of the payee, remarriage, cohabitation. We've already talked a little bit about that. You could, if you choose, say it will be X dollars for X month, not subject to future modification by the court.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to have at least two, and maybe you'll think of others, qualifications to that, which you have the right to write in the specific times when it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Disability of either party, involuntary loss of income. If you lose your job in a downsizing, if you get a good job and you're earning $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, but then they cut back on staff. Now, mind you, not voluntary, and there's a big difference between voluntary and involuntary. You
Right.
cannot decide, I've had it, I'm going to be a beachcomber,
I don't
and
have
get
that
it cut.
choice.
So you may want to be thinking about whether or not you'd rather leave it wide open to subject to modification under a variety of different circumstances, or whether you'd like to limit it so that you know what you can expect unless there's a termination contingency. Is this making sense to you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I think I'd like to be able to know what to expect and have that work for me so that I know, each what's going to happen.
And the contingencies that you would insert for being able to go back to the court would be
Involuntary
loss of income?
or I'm sorry, what was
disabilities.
disability?
And they really
Yes,
fold
yeah.
into each other.
Yes.
Remarriage.
Yes.
That's a given. Yeah, it
Okay.
terminates. It doesn't
Okay.
Modify. It just terminates
Okay.
upon
Yeah,
remarriage,
that's-
or proven cohabitation.
Right. Right.
I would be reluctant to give up the modification in the belief that Sue is going to come into some money. So I mean, I'd like to have that option available to me. What's wrong?
I don't think that is something that you can count on. It's really not something that I'm counting on right now. I don't know what's going to happen to my dad in the next 10 years.
So give me just a minute, Joe. When you say you would like that as a qualifier, talk a little bit more about that. Why? How would you feel
Well,
about it?
I think a court would look favorably on my asking to pay less spousal support to somebody who had inherited several $1 million. And
How do you personally feel about it?
feel about her inheriting.
If she
several-
inherits, yeah.
Congratulations to her, I guess, but that should alleviate my financial responsibility towards supporting her. I think that is common sense.
And you're not seeing it that way, Sue?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
This might be a good time for me to meet with you each separately for a few minutes.
It's up to you.
Let me start with Sue. Joe,
Okay.
would you go out into the waiting area?
Sure.
So, Sue, how are you doing? Okay?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
This is always a hard issue to deal with. You know from what Joe said in our very first meeting, and then again brought it up somewhat more gently today. Knowledge, or at least his belief, that you're going to inherit $2 million is causing him some grief. How do you feel about that?
I just don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that $2 million is going to come to me or not. There are so many things that could go wrong with my dad, with his finances. I can't count on that, and I don't want Joe to count on that. I know he sees, his paycheck being lopped in half, and I see mine being lopped even farther because I'm going to have to be working more, and I'm going to be bringing in less. I mean, my household is going to be bringing in less, and I'm not going to be there, and that it's terrifying for me. And yeah, I would love to say, oh, I'm going to get this $2 million, but I don't see how I can do that. I really don't.
Just in terms of the ranges of support that we've talked about to date, we don't know where that's going to end up.
Right.
Are you feeling fearful that you will not be able to meet the budget that we worked on?
Yes.
And empirically, it looks as if you will, right? I mean, did you see that?
Yes.
That you need a net $5,500 a month, and that the net support plus your net income looks like it will meet that.
Yes.
So is your anxiety just born of never having had to manage?
No, because I've had to manage it before, even though he thinks I spent money like it was going out of style. I didn't. I did have to manage it. It's the uncertainty of what could happen. And
Like what?
something could happen to the house. Something could happen to Madison or Chloe, or, I mean, I am not going to be able to go out to Arizona to visit Joe and his family. It's
almost sort of a free-floating anxiety that you have.
It's very much, and I just don't know that it's going to work, and it just scares me. And as much as I want to be on my own and be my own person, I have never
done it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I've always had a partner with me, and even though I felt like so many times I was doing this all on my own and raising the kids and keeping the household, I guess underlying it all, there was this paycheck coming in, and it was there, and I didn't have to worry about it.
It's going to take a little while for you to get used to it, for you to feel comfortable in the knowledge that if a tree falls on your roof, you've got homeowners insurance that's going to cover it.
Right.
But you're right, there are lots of unknowns. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with your father.
It's good. Being an only child, I think he was a little. He never spoiled me. Let's put it that way. We never really had things so easy. Things were achieved through hard work on his end.
Is this figure that Joe throws out, this $2 million, is that a sound number? I mean, have you talked to your dad about that?
Not recently, but I think it's probably around there.
Does he have long-term care insurance, do you know?
I don't know if he does. I really
Has
don't.
he sat down with you at all and talked about his plan or told you about his assets, or you've not met with his lawyer?
No, I've not met with his lawyer. I mean, I know he has a living will, but I don't know about his other will. I mean, I'm assuming I'm the only one on it because there's no other kids.
He doesn't have strong devotion to pet charities or anything that you're aware of?
No.
Has he gifted any money to you or the kids or Joe in the past?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because last year he did say that he had started talking to his lawyer about gifting money to our kids. And just to sort of get that down for the tax purposes for inheritance. And I didn't want to really talk to him about that. It's very hard for me to talk to him about him not being here.
Right. Although the gifting is something that could conceivably brighten his life while he is here.
True.
I'm sure he feels good about what he can do.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the kids would see it that way, but you're probably right.
Is he aware of your anxiety about this divorce?
Oh, he's not even aware of the divorce.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You haven't told him?
No.
Why is that?
He would look at it as my failure.
That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He would always say, well, you didn't work hard enough, or and
Have you thought that
I've been through this with my therapist,
I was
and
just
I'm
gonna
so I'm
ask
to the
you
point that
if
it
you
is
have.
not. It's not my fault. I mean, it was both of us. It was just
Well, just focusing on your father, have you
Yeah.
been talking in therapy about when is the right time to tell him? Because it's conceivable that if he knew, and if he knew how anxious you are about meeting your day-to-day bills,
right.
that he would see that as a way that he could be a very loving contributor to your sense of ease.
I don't see that happening. I don't see him doing a turnaround like that. He's not, for him to even mention gifting to the grandkids, it's not something that's gonna, he's not doing it because he wants to make their lives better. He's doing it to get out of the taxes that the government's going to try
Yeah,
to
but
take
getting
from him.
out of the taxes is one way of your receiving more money upon his death. And he obviously, at least I'm picking up that he really cares about you. And if he knew what you were going through, I mean, I understand the reluctance. Most people are reluctant to
Right.
share with their family what's
Right.
going on when a marriage is ending.
Right.
But in my experience, those who finally do discover that there's a lot of warmth and a lot of positive impact from that. You've picked up, I know, on how Joe feels about having to keep paying a very considerable sum, whatever it is you agree to, it's going to be
Right.
considerable,
Right.
after you've received some inheritance. And the question I'm wondering about is, let's assume you win. There'll be no recognition of the inheritance. You get the inheritance, and spousal support continues. Whether you do that by agreement or whether you end up in a court for modification, and the court says, well, we'll add $10,000 or $20,000 to your income, but we're not going to substantially change, because hopefully by then Joe's income will also have gone up.
Okay.
We don't know. But
Right.
let's say you win that fight,
Okay.
and the status quo is maintained for you. What's your guess about how Joe will react to your winning that fight, in terms of you're divorced, you're no longer under the same roof, you don't even talk to each other month to month, but you do have your adult children.
Right.
How do you think he's going to respond?
Not well.
Yeah.
No. He's going to be very resentful and very loud.
Would you, at some level, understand that? If the tables were turned? I don't know if you can even imagine that, but if you were in his shoes, do you think you might be feeling pretty much the way
I
he may
guess.
react?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to the first day we met, and when I asked you what the outcomes were that you most wanted to achieve,
Right.
you very quickly said a good relationship in the future with Joe. So I'm just wondering,
did.
knowing what his guessing, we can't really know, but making an educated guess about how he would respond or feel if you won that fight in every way down the road.
Yeah.
Would that be important to you?
Yeah. It would.
Yeah.
It would.
It might be worthwhile for us to spend some time today or next time or in between for you to give it some thought as to some options that you might put on the table, sort of a what if I inherit $2 million,
Okay.
I might be willing to consider XYZ. We're looking at perhaps substantial college tuition, we don't know.
Okay.
Just give it some thought, think about it, maybe talk about it in therapy, with good friends, whatever,
Okay.
as to how you could still maintain your own family monies that
Right.
came to you that you're
Right.
probably going to want to pass along to your kids.
Yeah.
By the way, that's often a point of concern on the part of folks, not necessarily with an inheritance, but just looking at the family assets,
Right. Right.
that you're going to remarry one day and half those assets are going to go to a new spouse
Right.
instead of to your kids.
Right.
And there are some legal avenues that we can even insert in your separation agreement that would give some, not complete, but some protection
Okay.
for that.
Okay.
So give
All
it some
right.
thought.
I will. Thank you. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's perfectly okay to put yourself first here.
Yeah.
But part of putting yourself first probably encompasses the family, the ongoing family relationship.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Okay, let me meet
All right.
with Joe for a few minutes. And
Okay.
then we'll get back together. So, Joe, let's first talk about one sticking point on this spousal support issue, which is the differential that your attorney is saying don't take less than. You know, you have to take that kind of language with a grain of salt. He probably gave you a range, and that was the lower end of the range. Am I right?
He recommended that as a starting point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. And that's what attorneys do, and that's as long as you're an intelligent consumer of legal advice, that's fine. And we heard that Sue's lawyer is saying don't
The
take
higher
less
end.
than 40%. Well, I thought it might be helpful before we spend a lot of time on that differential to kind of quantify what that would actually mean. If the differential is 30% of $95,000, then your spousal support would be $28,500 a year. And sometimes it's helpful to look at that in terms of monthly. So it's about $2,400 a month.
Which is completely tax deductible.
Absolutely. So we will say if that were it, the net cost to you would actually be about $1,650 a month. Net dollars. Once you get your tax
That's the
refund.
30% figure.
30%.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. The 40% figure, surprisingly, is not that much different. It's about $10,000 different. It would be
Annually.
$38,000 annually. That $10,000 differential in your tax bracket takes it down to $7,000. You with me? Because that's all tax deductible. So we're not talking huge numbers. They're not insignificant. I don't mean to say 7,000 times 10 years, you can do the math, is insignificant. It isn't. But in terms of perhaps reaching a number that would be acceptable to both of you, sometimes it's helpful to quantify.
No, and that is. I think we could probably. I think we could probably meet in the middle, though I'd be less likely to bend on the modification proposal because, despite what Sue says, I think she doesn't want to address and understandably so, the literal idea of losing her father. And I know, but she does stand to inherit a great deal of money.
From your perspective, what would be an equitable way, recognizing that, I don't know if you and Sue had talked about it in better days, but the chances are most folks think, at least in terms not of going out and buying a Porsche and buying a second home, but in terms of shepherding that money to leave to their kids. But I don't know what kinds of conversations you and
That we had when,
when things
we
were
thought
better.
we would inherit that money together.
Yeah.
We used to talk about, traveling.
Travel.
Yeah. Hopefully live on the rest into retirement because the only retirement we have is what I've earned. Sue is until recently hasn't worked, and there's no she doesn't have Social Security, she doesn't have any kind of retirement. So that was kind of her way of chipping into that end of things. So.
Yeah. That's kind of a bitter pill to swallow, isn't it?
It all, yeah.
You had that expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I think I heard you a number of times over the last month or so that we've been meeting, acknowledging that this was not the happiest of relationships to live in forever.
Yeah, I guess not. It's funny. I mean, since this has happened, it's just, I think back on things and how differently we viewed things. I don't remember being unhappy, but...
Really? You were ready to stick with it. Well, let me ask you this. Knowing the reality that Sue will very likely inherit, and knowing, and I think she understands how you feel about it,
Mm-hmm.
that you would bear some resentment if she did in fact inherit this money and you're still on the hook for paying. Have you thought of any requests that you would make of her to take into consideration if 4 years down the road and you're still on the hook for 6 more, what you would ask of her if she did inherit that money?
Well, that's why I would think that having that as part, allowing us to go back to court.
What would you ask the court to do?
To review her financial situation,
Right.
in light of that inheritance, yeah.
And I think you said your attorney did point out that only whatever she was earning on that money would be
Right,
added
it's
to
the
her
interest,
income.
right, yeah.
Yeah. And, I honestly don't know what sort of interest rate the court would use, whether they'd look at the market or whether they'd look at what you're earning in savings accounts or
Well,
less
that's
than 1%.
the difference of about 9% right there,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's...
And who knows what the market will be doing then.
Right.
So, at least for now, the one option you've come up with is to add that as a qualifier that would allow you to go back to court.
What else unless you can recommend, I mean, I don't know I don't have a lot of options, do I?
Well, we don't know. We don't know who would be making those decisions.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, to the extent possible, the two of you would make decisions and keep control.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get some sort of agreement between the two of us, then we wouldn't even have to revisit
Exactly.
that'd be super. But she doesn't sound, I mean,
Well, I don't
unless you're hearing something in your
preclude-
private meetings.
Don't preclude the fact that there could be a positive response to something you might suggest.
Well, that's good to hear. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
But we'll find out.
Okay.
But you have to have a request on the table.
That's true.
And maybe you need more time to think about it.
Yeah, I would have to think of how to phrase that exactly, or what it is I'm even asking for in that regard.
You talked about how while you were still married, knowing that this inheritance might come down the track, that it would both give you some ease in retirement, but also you mentioned some security for your kids. You haven't brought it up, so I'm a little bit hesitant to inject it, but what some folks worry about is that monies that would normally go to their children will not, because of some intervening person, a new husband. Is that something you even thought about?
Not in terms of the financial side of things, but that's a whole other. I mean, you bring up a whole other issue. Geez, I hadn't even. Yeah.
You may want to sit down with your attorney, go back for another consultation, and bring that idea to, because you might bring something back to the table.
Some way of protecting that. Yeah.
Protecting the future of your kids. I wish I could tell you there was some brilliant way that I know of to have it help you in retirement. It obviously could be a significant help to Sue. But I think the important thing is for you to think of ways in which, in the future, assuming Sue inherits a significant sum, who knows what it'll be, that it won't be a source of bitterness for the rest of your life. That
That would be great.
you know that one of the first things Sue said when we very first met was how important it was to her that the two of you continue to have a good relationship.
Yeah, she did say that. Yep.
And if that's important to her and you can think of avenues for assuring that,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't expect you to have it at the tip of your tongue.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't seem possible now in the heat of this acrimony, but maybe someday.
Yeah, your acrimony has been on the decline.
That's
at
true.
least here.
That's true.
You seem to be kind of
yeah, that's
accepting
true.
some realities and
Yep.
dealing with them
Yep.
in a civil and respectful, more respectful way
Trying.
than you had. Okay, would you go get Sue
Sure.
and tell her to come? Well, maybe I'll just call her.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you both. It's good to sometimes keep things efficient and moving forward by
Yeah.
talking to each of you separately. And I think you've made a lot of headway on this subject of the inheritance, because I'm thinking back to when it first came up, and it was a
Right.
pretty bitter thing to even contemplate. And I think the task for both of you now, recognizing that it doesn't have to be the elephant in the room, it can be put out on the table, is for you to think of some ways, either today or after you've had more time to consult or think about it, but today perhaps you have some ideas you could put on the table that would make the pill a lot less bitter to swallow if, let's say, 5 years from now, you actually receive. We never want to date anything to your father's death, because some wills can be in probate for a long time.
Right.
But once you actually were to receive a significant sum of money, we don't know what it will be. Any ideas, either one of you, that might make it feel somehow more equitable to both of you?
I would definitely now be willing to have the modification put on the spousal support if something like that should occur within the 10 years of the spousal report limit.
When we talk about
Definitely.
modification, I tried to explain earlier, you can have just a blanket modification through the court, or you
Right.
can actually identify certain issues that would call for modification, that would allow modification by the court. That doesn't mean you have to go to court to modify.
Okay.
You can
Right.
come back to
Okay.
mediation and talk it through at that point,
Right.
and decide then how you want to modify it.
Which I think is probably smart to sort of deal that hand and let it sit until it's needed, and then
It
come
may
back to
feel
it.
smarter for
Yeah,
you than
yeah.
it does for Joe, because you're the one who, when that happens, will be feeling more secure. It may also be worthwhile to put some ideas out on the table now, which you don't have to sign on to, but at least can think about and talk about. Do you have any thoughts, Joe, about kind of a what if?
Yeah, I think that I would ask Sue to think about
There you go.
actually tying numbers to the possible inheritance. Upon the receipt of $1 million from her father, she would agree to reduce the spousal support to half, or something like that. And I would, and I don't know, and upon remarrying, there would be some sort of, that money would not be going to, whomever, the vet or something. It would be safe for the kids.
Well, I know that's doable for sure. Putting
good.
that money as mine and not, I guess that would be a prenuptial agreement.
Well, but that you would
Should
be
I
on our
ever
divorce
be,
papers. That would be yes.
You would need a prenup that would not only establish that as your separate property,
Right.
but that would require that your intended spouse waive the right to go to the probate court and set aside your will.
Huh? Really?
Today, in,
Huh?
in the state of Ohio,
My goodness.
if you wrote a will that left everything to the SPCA,
Yes.
your spouse could go to court and say, I get half.
Wow.
But that's a right that can be waived,
Okay.
and
And that would
presumably-
be part of the prenuptial agreement.
yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
preclude you.
But I don't
from-
see that's, yes, I don't see myself getting married, but
Nobody does.
I,
I understand that. Nobody
Yes,
thinks
yes.
they'll ever want to go through something like this again. So
Okay.
why, yeah. It doesn't actually give you complete protection for what you're
understand.
talking
I
about,
understand.
because you still would have the right to leave your money to whoever you wanted to.
right.
And that could be your kids, it could be a new spouse, it could be the SPCA. So it doesn't limit your right,
Right.
it
Okay.
limits a new spouse's right. And presumably that would be a reciprocal understanding,
Sure.
because even though you may not now be
Sure.
anticipating anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely can see that a modification of the spousal support would take place at that point. I'm not sure that I can say right now what those numbers would be, because I don't know what's going to happen, and I can't see that far.
Well,
in the
you're
future
hearing it
like
for the very
this.
first time today
Yes, yes.
as a request, and it bears thinking about,
Okay.
and perhaps consulting about,
Okay.
to see what you could come back with.
Okay.
That would make sense. And Joe, you may have some other ideas too, something to
Yeah,
offer.
I would like to talk about, I'm just throwing this out there, but as I said, maybe tying, the inheritance amount to a percentage, and just to think about it, and I don't know what would be.
A percentage of,
A reduction in the spousal support upon receipt of X amount of dollars.
mhm.
It seems like having some sort of,
Well, right, and that's something that I'm going to have to
I understand.
think about and
Right.
look at figures and numbers
Right.
and
I understand.
One thing Joe shared with me when we were alone was the assumption that he always made, I don't know if the two of you talked about it way back when or not, that your father's estate would one day serve as a source of the future retirement of both of you. And now
Yeah.
that the marriage is ending, he can no longer look at that inheritance in that way. So and yet there's too much uncertainty still
yeah.
to be able to make some very definite trade-offs in terms of, oh, well, then you keep your retirement, and then you don't know what's going
Right,
to happen.
right. We
Yeah.
don't. So
Right.
that will have to be thought over and dealt with.
So let's,
Yeah,
in the time
yeah.
we have left, can we go
Okay.
back to, give it some thought, both of
I
you,
will.
and maybe come back with some other ideas?
I will.
But in the time we have left, let's talk a little bit about where you both are on the spousal support term and amount. When I was working with Joe in caucus, Sue, we ran some numbers
Okay.
on what the difference would be between what each of your attorneys is suggesting. And I'm willing to bet each of your attorneys, if push came to shove, would acknowledge that the percentages they're using fall within a range. They're not really sure. It could be 29%, it could be 43%.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't know. But if we are working with the numbers they gave you, the 30 and the 40, 30% of the differential would be $28,500 a year,
Okay.
spousal support, which, and 40% would be $38,000. Now, what we haven't yet talked about, but really plays into this significantly, because when you did your budgets that amount isn't going to meet your budget until you have a more substantial income. But in the past, you've been receiving bonuses. And this last bonus was $30,000. If you were in the courthouse, they would average your last 3 years of bonuses and
wow.
add it to your income and make the assumption that it was going to go forward. And if it didn't, you'd have to go back to court and ask for a modification because the bonus didn't happen. Or you would go back and say, hey, you got an $80,000 bonus. Okay. So what many folks do is they agree on a number for spousal based on your base.
Okay.
And if you're agreeing to, for the sake of argument, 35% of the differential, you would also pay 35% of the bonus. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
So that if it is, if it's there, it's paid, it's on an if-come basis, but you don't have to think you're going to be penalized if the bonus is low. So that would probably come pretty close to meeting your budget.
Yes, I think it would. Yeah.
What do you think?
I would be more likely to come up to that figure if I had some, if Sue would consider this inheritance question. If I knew that if she came into a great deal of money that she would take that into consideration in what I was paying her.
I just said I was.
Yeah.
I
Well,
understand that. I understand that's what
I
I'm
think
saying.
what Joe is saying is he's trying to balance here
Yeah,
a couple of
that's all
things.
it is,
And let me
yeah.
remind you, we haven't made a definitive decision about college.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah,
college, you've got
yeah.
spousal support, you've got inheritance, all three of those issues that are.
Well, I thought
at
we
the moment
agreed in
undecided.
principle that there would be contributions, that we would both be making contributions or start that fund.
For college?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't think you want to put in writing that you'll start a fund because we
Right,
don't know whether you
right.
can.
Right.
Maybe you can, depending on how you're going to live.
Right.
No, as I said, I thought we agreed in principle on that idea
I
of
think
starting
you'd-
a fund. Yeah.
Is that your understanding as well, that you would share the expense, not start a fund?
Yeah, right.
but
Share the expense after scholarships and all that.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that could be a percentage too. I mean, that could be a percentage based on income. I mean, if assuming you get a full-time job and you get a salary better than minimum wage, that I understand that would put you in financial straits. So that would be a percentage. You would be putting fewer actual dollars into this fund.
Well, Joe, I'm confused because you're autonomous once the divorce is granted, and you're a saver. Apparently, you believe in putting money aside now for Madison's college expenses down the road. And by the same, or not the same, the difference is that Sue is anxious about having enough money to even meet her budget. And to say you will also put $300 a month, I don't know, I'm picking a number out of the air,
Right.
into a college fund right now, pre-inheritance, pre-gifting,
Job. Yeah.
however, coming to some agreement that you will share those costs however you're going to do it. No inheritance, no gifting. You may decide, I don't know, get some of the equity out of the house.
What's the gifting?
Sue and I talked about the fact that, at least to date, her father has not been using gifting as a way of decreasing his inheritance tax.
That's correct, yeah.
And Sue doesn't feel comfortable talking to him about that. And so we don't know if that will ever
Yeah,
happen.
I've mentioned it, yeah.
You've mentioned it?
To her,
Oh,
yes.
to Sue.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's a touchy area. Some people feel...
That's why I haven't pressed it too much, but it's. I mean, this guy's, he's sitting on a,
Right.
you know.
So do you think you could come to terms on how you would support college with a cap, with the understanding that scholarships come first, based on whatever your income is at the time? we're looking 3 years down the road.
Yes.
So if you'd look at your tax returns for the prior calendar year,
Right.
you'd look at, and whatever that pro rata is would be applied to the cap. Today, the cap would be around $16,000, I think, at UC. Is that, and would that be a comfortable agreement for the two of you to make?
Yes. And if he decides to go out right now and start putting money
Right.
aside,
He's got that.
can do
Okay.
that. If I decide that I want to wait and do it at the 11th hour, I can do that also. Correct?
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying I'm going to. I'm just saying
Well, you don't,
I don't.
it's hard to predict what'll happen
It's very
3
hard
years
to
down
predict.
the road.
Yes. Okay.
Doing the calculation is going to be easy. Looking at your tax returns for the prior year, you'll
Right.
know what amount you need to come up with.
Right.
How you come up with it is your own affair.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, so if you're okay with that on college, and I'm just wondering, do you need some more time to be thinking about this whole inheritance issue?
It sounds like she does, yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable putting a number, even a percentage, on it right now because I just am not.
Okay. Well, you've done good work today because you've come a lot closer to where you finally need to be. I think we'll finish
Good.
up next
Oh
time.
my gosh.
I think we will.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, B.
You're welcome. Take care. Well, welcome back, guys. I think this is going to be our last session. I think we're going to be able to wind up today, which is wonderful.
Great.
You have worked efficiently, and I think that's great. I sent you away last time to think a little bit more about the inheritance issue and how you wanted to address it.
Right.
Do either one of you have some thoughts to put on the table? Do you have any additional requests?
She was the one mulling it over, so that's...
Right. The inheritance issue. Can I just step back one little step? I was talking to my lawyer and she said that perhaps I had agreed to the 10-year cap on the spousal support, that maybe I had gone into that a little bit too hastily and that I should readdress that issue and see if perhaps we could lengthen that time period until he stops working.
Which will be never.
That's not true. I don't think it's going to be
How could I
true.
possibly afford to stop working?
Look, I can't afford to stop working either. And up until now, my entire career has been as a mother and a homemaker. And I know I didn't get a paycheck for that, but that's what I did that whole time.
So what is it that you're requesting?
I'm requesting that the spousal support end when he stops working and not cap it off at 10 years when I turn 65.
You're going to do this now. This is our last session. We had agreed pretty much to everything up to this point, I thought. And you're the one, if I recall, and maybe you wrote this down, B, you're the one who suggested the 10 years. And I agreed to it rather quickly because I was, I had been instructed that I might be paying forever.
Yeah.
And so that, and I agreed to that.
Well, you both remember that at the very outset I pointed out that it isn't over until it's all over.
Right.
That everything is still up for grabs. In changing this, Joe may want to rethink some of the agreements that he made.
Sure.
And
You bet.
also propose a balancing change. I don't know, Joe, whether you can talk about that now. Are there some things that you think that you agreed to in haste? You've really worked out all of the tough issues.
I don't
here.
love, yeah, I'm on the hook for this house with a promissory note that has no value. I collect 0% interest on, and I may see that money when. I have no idea. I mean, if I passed away tomorrow, I would never see it. And it, I mean, it could, who knows that, you'll be in that house 40 years. I mean,
Be in the house
So what would you suggest vis-a-vis the house? Would you like to change the arrangement that you'd already made, sort of in the way that?
Well, I'm not. I
Sue is
intend to work
proposing.
at least until I'm 70. So I don't. You want how much more of support? How many more years?
Till you stop working.
Till I'm 70. You want to?
I don't know when you're going to stop working.
I can't quit working.
Remember, you guys have made already an agreement on what would happen to the spousal support if the inheritance came along
Mm-hmm.
before then.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
Right.
how does that play in? But I think maybe a piece we have not discussed that maybe your lawyer did discuss with you vis-a-vis the house. Not only do you not get the equity, you're not required to pay it
Right.
up front, but you're still on the mortgage.
Yeah.
Now, your agreement will be a court order that says you're responsible for the mortgage in full. However, that's between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
And the bank doesn't care about that. And if you stopped paying for any reason, they would come after you, Joe. So some people get anxious about that. The greater problem could be if you decided to try to purchase real estate and your debt to credit ratio will be such that he can't purchase real estate as long as he's still on that. So I don't know whether you could seek some compromises here on it's questionable that a court would order you're now 53 17 years of
Yeah.
spousal support would be a little unlikely for a 25-year marriage. Not impossible,
Okay.
unlikely.
I mean, it doesn't have to be until forever. It can certainly come down. I'm not planning on being in the house for 40 years, forever. I want to be there until Madison gets out of high school, and then I'm going to need to fix it up a little bit before I can put it on the market. Hopefully by then the market will have turned around. So if it sells at that point, you'll get that money right away, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When it sells, yes, I would get. Yes, I would get that note filled.
But the house might
You're
not
talking
sell.
about-
The house might go for 5 years, for 6 years without selling.
Right.
So would you?
You're talking about starting this process when she gets out of high school or college. So.
High school. High school.
So in 3 years, you're going to put the house on the market, and presumably then-
Probably 4 years.
So in 4 years, you're going to put the house on the market, and presumably within a year after that, we have a sale completed, and I would get my money back. I would get my money out of the house.
Right.
Okay.
In the unlikely event that you received your inheritance next year, then what?
Well,
In terms of the payout of
Right.
the equity.
I mean, I could certainly pay off the what I owe him on the house, that promissory note.
So you could
At
have
that
that be a
point-
condition of your
Great.
note that if
Great.
the inheritance is received, you get
That'd be
paid right
super.
away.
That or 5 years, whichever comes first. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Well, no,
Well, it'd
no, it's the
probably be
sale of the
3.
house.
It'd probably be 3 because Madison turns 18 in 3 years. If you're talking about what
Well,
a court would order.
but Sue said 4, and then and I'm trying to err on the side of caution here, and that if it's 3 years till Madison's out of school, a year for her to fix it up, and then if it sells within the next year, 5 years just to be on the safe side. I'm saying I either get the money from when Sue's father passes away, or I get it within no later than 5 years. Is that correct?
Only if that's what you're agreeing to.
Yes.
But that wouldn't necessarily be what a court would do.
Right.
Because they would expect you in that last year, if it were 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
to get the house
Right.
ready and put it on the market after
Right.
2
Right.
in
Okay.
order to.
Okay.
So I'm even giving, okay.
You know,
No, no,
guys-
no. Okay. I think I can do that. I think we can swing that. Sure. I mean, even if if I have to sell the house at a loss, he'll get his money back.
Within 3 years.
Yes.
Either if the house is sold sooner, you get the inheritance.
Yes.
So the understanding about the house, now we still haven't reached an understanding about the term of spousal support, as I understand
Right.
this. But you're willing to make some concessions vis-a-vis the house,
Yes.
that the note would read payable in 3 years or sooner upon sale or receipt of inheritance.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Correct.
And we still have to address this other issue which has raised its head during our last meeting.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you guys, this is pretty traditional. When we get close to the end, folks often are standing on the brink
Yeah.
and they don't know what the future holds.
And they have a
in
lawyer
some
telling them-
ways, having the devil you know is a little more comfortable than the devil you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be that folks always argued about the photo albums at the very last minute.
Yeah.
Who gets the photo albums? Well, in today's day and age, when photos are so easy to reproduce, it doesn't become that big an issue. But there is something snagging. And now the only thing that I know of that is still remaining a snag is your rethinking the spousal support term. And I don't know if that means we need to put everything on hold here while you rethink it as well.
I'd rather wrap this up. So if you're telling me that I'm going to be guaranteed that I'm going to receive my money from the house within 3 years,
Yes.
then I would add an additional 2 years to the spousal support. That takes me to 65. And then if I stay at my job till 70, which I'd rather not work past 70, then the last 5 years are mine.
Yeah.
I see you nodding your head, Sue. Does that mean that's okay with you?
Yeah, that is. I can see that in 12. Yeah. Yes.
Do you need to check with your lawyer
No.
to make sure? Okay.
No. Yes. That's fine with me.
Okay. Well, I think we've touched all the bases, guys. I will know for sure when I go back over my file and note all the agreements that you've made along the way.
Okay.
And I'm going to write that up, call it a memorandum of understanding. It's in English,
Okay.
and I send it to both of you and say, is this correct?
Okay.
And once you both let me know yes, or if you see something that's not quite in sync yet,
Right.
we need to work on it, then at that point, when it's done, you get it to your lawyers.
Okay.
And I really commend both of you. This has been a hard road.
Thank
and
you. It has.
You've done an interesting thing, not just for yourselves. You've really done something special for your kids. Because, you know, in today's world, the likelihood is very good that your children are going to have multiple committed relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they won't be multiple marriages, but the chances are very good. And what you hear from a lot of children of divorce
Mm-hmm.
is how they question whether they're going to ever be able to have a good relationship and fear the possibility of it breaking up and being destructive. You know, when they've lived through a divorce where parents have really been
Torn it.
combatants and taken a year or 2 or 3 years to do it, you guys have modeled for them in a very important way, because they're going to be able to look back when their relationship is faltering
Mm-hmm.
and say, this isn't the end of the world. My folks were able to do this respectfully, stay in control. I can do that too. So it's really something wonderful. It's a gift to them.
Thank you,
It
B.
really is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've helped us through this.
Good. I hope
Through
so.
through very dark hours, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
I I speak for both of us, I think, when I say that we appreciate the help that you've given us.
You are so welcome. You've done great. You'll note from the recording that I tell both parties when they're together what the questions are that I'm going to ask when I meet with them in caucus. I think it's important that they know that, so that the one who's sitting out in the waiting room isn't sitting there wondering what I'm talking about with their negotiating partner. As to the second question about how you negotiated during your marriage, that question, although it's important on its own for me to know something about their negotiating style, the question has a dual purpose, and that is for me to learn whether or not there's been any domestic violence. Sometimes it comes out loud and clear, other times I need to probe. When I get the response that there has been some significant intimidation, whether it's physical as such or not, I really need to probe further and find out just exactly how long it's been since this happened, how vulnerable this person still feels. And in most cases, when there has been domestic violence, it's best to terminate the mediation, simply because in the long run, it won't work. When we're just talking about somebody who is reporting that they tend to go along to get along, something we often hear from both parties, I make a point of assuring myself that they know it's important to let me know when they feel that that's happening. I may pick up on it, but I may not. And if they are feeling as if they are caving in against their best interest, they need to let me know, and we need to meet in caucus. You may have noticed that I spend quite a bit of time with the parties when they first arrive, making quite a lengthy initial statement about how the process is going to work. And there are a number of things that I try to accomplish in that. I often share with them something personal about myself professionally, how I got to doing what I'm doing, and that personal connection, which really comes up throughout the process from time to time, helps us develop a connection. They are sharing with me the most intimate details of their life. My being willing to share some with them, boundaries here are important, helps us make a true human connection. Another reason for the lengthy statement at the outset, aside from a pretty detailed explanation of how the process will proceed, is by letting them know that we're going to focus on the future, not on the past. It prevents a lot of pouring out about the injustices they've had to deal with over many, many years, and we do focus on the future. The third reason is folks come into the room anxious and tense. They don't appear to be. They appear to be calm and settled, and they sit down and they are on their best behavior. But I know that this is a time of real tension for them. My taking some time to just talk at them, and I tell them at the outset, sit back and relax, because I'm just going to talk at you for a few minutes. And they do. You can see their shoulders drop. And by the time I've talked for some time, they've had a moment to collect themselves, to feel more centered. You may have noticed at one point in the session, Joe became more and more sarcastic. He leaned forward and he was deriding Sue, and it became really troublesome for Sue. She was becoming more and more annoyed, and I intervened. And I said to Joe, you know, something to the effect of, this isn't really working well for Sue, all this sarcasm. And then I said, and you know what, Joe, it isn't working so well for me either. Now you might think of that as kind of an unprofessional remark by the mediator, to kind of go off script in that way. From time to time it happens, and it may not be all bad. There was another time when I was working with a client who was a bit of a bully, was coming on very strong and insisting he was right in every respect. And I was fed up with it, and I said, "Oh, please give me a break." Not a good idea. That went over the line. So it's a careful balance that the mediator has to strike, not being wooden in responses, being genuine, but at the same time being guarded and not overdoing it. Think about what I said to Joe about the sarcasm getting to me as well. If I had it to do over again, would I have said that? Maybe so, because that didn't seem like all that risky a thing to have done. But I have to tell you, at an interim in the taping, Joe, out of character, came to me just as his real actor self and said, "You know, when you said that to me, that really upset me." So I learned something there. In the video you've watched, the parties were reasonably well behaved. There are occasions when some real hostility breaks out and people become quite angry. My way of handling that is to separate them and meet in caucus with the person who has kind of lost control and talk about how I do think their anger is legitimate and maybe healthy to vent from time to time. But I need them to consider whether or not this particular behavior at this particular time is working for them. Is it moving them towards a point that is really in their own best interest? If they have a certain level of emotional maturity, they can take that in. They can readjust and they can calm down. From time to time, when folks are very close to agreement, they'll return 2 weeks later and that agreement has eroded. It's a good point at which to question whether there are some hidden decision makers who are influencing what's going on in the mediation session. For example, a new relationship that has grown up, a parent who is intervening and giving advice. This frequently happens in the custody arena when folks are reaching a really good understanding about how they're going to share time with their kids, spend money on their kids, and then someone returns and says, "There is no way I'm going to do X, Y, Z." Really need to inquire as to who's influencing that decision on the outside, and sometimes actually bring that decision maker into the process. Not too long ago, I worked with a couple where this was post-decree, and the new wife and the former wife were really at swords points, but they had never actually met. I asked if they'd both be willing to have the new wife come in, and they were, and she did. And I met together with the two women, and they really struck up quite a bond by the time we were finished. Now that was a happy ending. It won't always be that way. But it is important to recognize that there are often decision makers who are not at the table. You may have noticed in watching the video that at the very end all of the issues seemed to fall into place and everything was decided. We didn't completely clarify how those decisions were made. Obviously, in real life, they would have to be made. And the issue that was presenting a problem for Joe and Sue was the anticipation of Sue inheriting a great deal of money. That doesn't come up frequently, but from time to time it does. One way this year, such a fact situation did resolve for me in real life was the wife agreed. It was a long-term marriage. She was going to be receiving spousal support probably for more than 10 years. And she did agree that in the event that she received in excess of a certain dollar amount, I think it was $1 million, perhaps more, and actually received that in cash that would be earning her some income, she agreed that she would accept a significant reduction in her spousal support, I think down to 50%. So there are many, many options that can be put on the table that can yield an agreement in mediation in a way that a court could actually never help these people reach resolution. When folks complete the mediation process, they've done a lot of hard work. It's been an emotional time. And I think they ought to be commended for the hard work they've done. They've really given a tremendous gift to their children, to themselves as well, but particularly to their children. And I also would like them to walk out the door feeling strong, feeling committed to the decisions they've made. They will be taking this agreement into their attorney's offices. And some attorneys might look at it and say, you gave away too much. You didn't ask for enough. I want them to be able to reflect on all the work they did, the good work they did, and stand up for what they've accomplished.